This is a different league, and this is another Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio. Alongside Ari Timken on social at Ari Sports, ARI Sports. I'm James Westling. We've got Hype Man Will producing and engineering today's show. And, man, coaching chaos everywhere you look. College football is spinning, and right in the middle of it, Texas Tech is sitting here with a path and a chance to win a national championship. So we'll break that down on today's show. What do the Red Raiders have to do to make it to the championship game? We will also be going through our Big 12 today. All conference teams. We'll hit on some quarterbacks and some running backs today. And then we've got a huge guest lineup with Kellis Robinett, the K-State beat writer. K-State is apparently hiring a general manager, which is a position that I think everybody in the Big 12 could really use and needs. He's the K-State beat writer for the Kansas City Star and the Wichita Eagle. Josh Furlong, the sports director at KSL and beat writer for Utah Athletics, will join us on the heels of that massive private equity announcement yesterday. And then Greg Wrubell, the play-by-play announcer for the BYU Cougars, will be on the show to talk about their bowl game matchup and everything happening on the hardwood. But coaching chaos nationally, a ton of movement here in the Big 12, some really cool headlines in the conference. But how about the Sherrone Moore story deal at Michigan? It just continues to get crazier and crazier. He's out. Biff Poggi is the interim head coach at Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, it's yesterday was a different day. And, you know, it's what's interesting is sports is so compelling because of the individuals and because people are fallible. And in what we do from an analysis and an opinion standpoint, you know, people always ask, like, how do you have things to talk about in the offseason? It's like things always happen because human beings are involved and human beings are extremely fallible. And, you know, so about 5 o'clock last night, you start to see word circulating that Michigan had fired Sherrone Moore as their head coach. And you're like, whoa, that was quick. And then you see that he was fired for cause. And that was just the beginning of a wild story that's continuing. Sherrone Moore is in police custody and was overnight after an alleged assault occurred. Some of the details are very slow to come out, and an investigation is ongoing. No charges have been filed, James. But, yeah, I mean, this thing went from was fired for cause for an inappropriate relationship with a staffer, and all of the jokes and things you start to see on social media to something very, very serious. And, you know, who knows what actually ended up happening. Certainly, I'm sure much of it will come out. But, you know, I mean, just an insane story. And now, you know, once again, the coaching carousel always has crazy twists and turns every single season. And, you know, there were more coaches fired in season this year than any other year. And here, a couple weeks after the early signing period where Michigan inked a big-time class, Michigan's now looking for a new football coach. When you think about Michigan, obviously this is one of the premier programs, the winningest program in all college football. But basically in the last 2 decades, really since Lloyd Carr was let go, this has been a underachieving program. Jim Harbaugh came in, fixed it at his alma mater, won a national championship, handed the keys over to Sherrone Moore, the pride of Derby, Kansas, went to Oklahoma as an offensive guard after going to Butler Community College.
Which today I learned he's from Derby, Kansas, and graduated high school around the same time that I did. Yeah, Derby, Kansas, the same high school that Sherrone Moore went to is the same high school that's produced a lot of really good college football players. One in the Big 12, Dylan Edwards, who's now transferring out of Kansas State. Who knows where he lands. But, yeah, today I learned he's from Derby, Kansas, right here in Big 12 country. Went to Butler Community College, which was like the Alabama of JUCOs back in the day. Played at Oklahoma, so there's a lot of, like, Midwest ties.
Yeah, and, I mean, was basically appointed, given the keys to Michigan at 39 years old, 38 years old, now 39. And, you know, so, I mean, Michigan as a program has underachieved really in the last 2-3 decades, except for the Jim Harbaugh era And this will be a different period of time for them as they look for a new coach. And, again, under the guise of, a really dark cloud hanging over them. And, for Sherrone Moore, it's just crazy to think he's 39 years old. He's presiding over one of the best football programs in the country. He's 8-5 year one, 9-3 this year, certainly trending up. You just threw it all away.
And he was very likable. Michigan fans really liked Sherrone Moore. That's why he got the job. Is he was, the king of charisma. Wins and losses wise, he wasn't any better than Jim Harbaugh. And they wanted Harbaugh out before he finally won a national championship. So Moore kind of had that it factor. And overnight, his reputation has been completely tarnished. And it's really, there's a lot to unpack with it. What were you saying before we got on the air live here? Something rules all. I can't remember what it was.
What's that?
Something rule. I don't remember what you said exactly.
About Wu-Tang?
But Wu-Tang? Yeah, Wu-Tang. Definitely.
Cash?
Yeah, it was definitely that.
Cash rules everything around me?
Yeah, cash. That's what it was.
Cream get the money?
Cream get the money. Yes, cash is what you were saying. So
yeah, we talked about it with Bill Belichick, right? The undefeated heavyweight champion of the world. Undefeated. And yeah, it will ruin careers in some cases, bad decisions.
Young women, man. Bill Belichick's running around with this 24-year-old. Now you've got Sherrone Moore and the woman that, it's public. He had this illicit affair with this Michigan staffer who he gave a 55% pay raise once they started hanging out, if you will. And
think about it, her life is ruined now.
Yes. His
life is ruined now. His wife's life is ruined now. Sherrone Moore's wife. He has 3 daughters. Their lives are forever changed. And you hate to say ruined, but my goodness, Sherrone Moore has to come out of this with whatever ended up happening.
And then to top it all off, he gets arrested.
Yeah.
Last night.
For an alleged assault.
Alleged assault. That's what the charges are?
Well, there's
alleged.
I do not believe he's been charged. He's being held as an investigation is ongoing to alleged assault. For an alleged assault.
It's insane.
It is.
And then the interim coach is Biff Poggi, who got fired from Charlotte. He was at Michigan as a defensive assistant. Then he went to Charlotte. He was going to rebuild the Charlotte program. Got canned after 3 years. He's back at Michigan. He's now the interim coach. And him and himself is a wild story because he was a hedge fund manager. He got into finance before he ever got into coaching and made a bunch of money on Wall Street, essentially. So the reason he took the Charlotte job is it's the banking capital of the world. And he wanted to, he thought he could turn around the football team. He was making all of his players, which I think it's a great idea. They had to go through financial training courses during the summer. He was really educating his players on the business side of things. And actually, when you look at Charlotte, the season they just had, they may have let him go too soon because he was trending up a little bit to a certain degree. But now he's the interim coach at Michigan.
Yeah.
Biff Poggi.
And now at the end of the cycle here, one of the premier programs in college football is looking for a new head coach. And, we'll see where they end up going. You feel like at Michigan, they like sitting head coaches. You start to wonder, are there any coaches in the Big 12 that may get wandering eyes for a program like Michigan? Who knows? We'll see. But I'm telling you, every year, right? A couple of years ago, it was Saban retiring. At the end of the cycle, you just get some crazy things that happen that completely change the entire dynamic.
Yeah, and we're so laser focused on this Sherrone Moore situation that I haven't even gone to that next layer of who in the world is Michigan going to hire? Is Biff Poggi actually going to be coaching their football team next season? Because it is late in the cycle relative to the calendar year, but almost 24% of power conference jobs are open now, I think was the stat I saw. It's just an insane number of coaching turnover, similar to what we see in the NFL year in and year out, where guys get fired and it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense in terms of wins and losses. The window for success has gotten smaller and smaller. not only in the NFL, but now in college football too, I think.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, and it's, as we discussed kind of throughout the season as coaches were getting fired in season, it's one of those things where if you are not in the race for a playoff spot, coaches are going to get fired. Whereas opposed to in previous years, you kind of let the season play out and then athletic directors make decisions at the end of the season. We talked about at the end of the year, normally on that Sunday following the final games of the regular season, that's when you see a lot of coaches fired, and there weren't really many fired on that day because most of them have already been fired.
Yeah.
It's a huge changing tide of college football. It will only become more and more like that. And, this is just a wild story specific to Sherrone Moore in Michigan. And there's so much that's not known publicly yet, not just in terms of, the situation with the alleged assault and why he's being detained. You'd think that there's something pretty substantial there for them to detain him during an ongoing investigation.
Yeah.
But beyond that, James, when did Michigan know about this illicit, quote-unquote, affair? There's all kinds of rumors and innuendo about what Michigan knew and when they knew. There's certainly a lot of people around the program that, if you look at social media, had inklings of this.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just a wild story that with reverberations across the entire sport.
Yeah. Coaches now, in today's era, you get 2.5, maybe 3 years to turn around your program. Otherwise, you're out. Now, a program that is ascending here in the Big 12, coming off a 9-win season, is Houston. And Houston has added former Kansas State quarterback, Heisman runner-up, and the high school quarterback coach of their 5-star coming in, Keyshawn Henderson. They have added Michael Bishop to their staff as an offensive assistant. No details on what specific group he'll be coaching, but this is just really cool. All the connections. Michael Bishop was coached by Willie Fritz at Blinn Junior College, blows up, goes to Kansas State. Like I said, runner-up for the Heisman, and now they are reunited in Houston on staff for the Cougars.
Yeah, and Michael Bishop had been working as a high school football coach at Legacy in the Houston area where he coached Keyshawn Henderson. This move makes too much sense. And now you've got two legendary K-State quarterbacks coaching in the Big 12. Obviously, Colin Klein is the head coach at K-State, and Michael Bishop as an assistant at Houston. And I wonder if over time Bishop takes over as a quarterback's coach, offensive coordinator, who knows. But great hire by Houston. Again, it makes too much sense. A lot of times high school coaches will be given assistant roles when a big-time recruit is able to come on board. But, this one with Bishop having played for Fritz, being a college football legend, it makes too much sense. So I love the hire by Willie Fritz.
I love the hire. It also kind of reminds me, and we see it more in basketball, like when a 5-star commits to a non-traditional blue blood program, and then all of a sudden his brother or his dad or
Danny Manning at Kansas, that's a blue blood.
It's the first one that comes to mind.
They hired his dad. It happens all the time.
Oklahoma State hired Cade Cunningham's high school coach, or was it his brother maybe?
High school, no, I can't remember, yeah.
Same type of thing with Michael Bishop. And I think, this is to keep Keyshawn Henderson in Houston. And I would also say,
yeah, but he's also Michael Bishop. I think there's
a little bit of both.
Yeah, it's a little bit of that, but again, this move makes a ton of sense. And then Willie Fritz has history with Bishop.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of times it's like, yeah, okay, we'll take this guy on staff, and then he'll be on staff for as long as this player's there. Keyshawn Henderson is helping Bishop as much as Bishop's helping Keyshawn Henderson.
Yeah, that's well said. And I think having him on staff will also help kind of keep Keyshawn Henderson on the right path. Like if he's disgruntled because maybe he's not the starting quarterback. Connor Wegman still has eligibility. So Houston has a really good problem to have at that position, but if Keyshawn Henderson isn't on the field right away, day one as the starter, or they've got to put him in some packages, or maybe he only plays 4 games to keep his red shirt, like Michael Bishop is the perfect guy to have on staff to kind of mentor him and tutor him and help him stay patient.
Let me ask you this. Did Connor Wegman do enough this season to where he should have the job already, or do you think that he did not do enough that he should be competing with Keyshawn Henderson?
I think he did more than enough.
Really?
Yes, I do. I think he was incredibly undervalued this season. As a dual threat quarterback, he had the third most, in league games only, not counting the non-conference, he had the third most rushing touchdowns in the league among any players, quarterbacks, running backs. His passing efficiency was really good. The only thing he didn't do was throw for a ton of yards, but that's not Houston's offense. That's not the Houston way. I think Wegman's earned it, absolutely.
Yeah, see, I don't. If I'm Willie Fritz, I go into next season and early into fall camp, and really into spring practice with those guys competing. Because for them to take the next step, Connor Wegman played really well at times. Running the ball was definitely where he was more effective. He was not as effective throwing the ball. And he had some clunkers. And he had some clunkers in games where, if you have better games, now you're closer to competing for a Big 12 championship. And maybe he does take a next step, but, at this point, Wegman kind of is what he is. He's definitely not the 5-star recruit that he once was. And so I don't know. If I'm Willie Fritz, if I'm Houston, I'm thinking, I know what this guy's ceiling is, and Keyshawn has a much higher ceiling. That doesn't mean that Keyshawn Henderson is ready to go day one. And that's obviously why you have them competing. But I would definitely not, if I'm Willie Fritz in Houston, think I'm going into next season with Wegman locked in, because there were times he was not good enough. There were games he was just not good enough. And he's been around college football long enough to where, it kind of is who he is at this point.
So you feel like Wegman didn't do enough. I see what you're saying.
There were specific games that he was bad.
Yeah, Texas Tech, he was bad. Now, he got knocked out of that game. He got hurt, but he was 5 for 12 before he got knocked out of the game. He had 71 yards.
But there were a few others where he had, multiple picks. He
had 9 interceptions this season. That's a little high.
And did not throw for a bunch of, he's not a throwing quarterback. Last time I checked, you need your quarterback to be able to throw the football pretty consistently.
Yeah. He had 644 rushing yards, 11 rushing touchdowns on the season. Yeah, I don't know. Can Houston take the next step with him at quarterback, or is Keyshawn Henderson that good that he steps on the field and he's the guy right away?
He had a 3-interception game and a loss to UCF. Or, no, they did beat UCF, but 3-interception game and that win that they had to kick a game-winning field goal at the end. A 17-14 loss against TCU. He was 15 of 29 for 51.
That was the game where he really
yards,
struggled as a passer.
A 51% completion percentage. Mm-hmm. So, back-to-back weeks, basically, between UCF and TCU. And again, remember, they were in it at this point. They were in it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe he was hurt and it was lingering, but, that's part of the game here.
The last coaching kind of front office movement over the last 24 hours, Kansas State, not only did they hire Colin Klein, but they are adding a general manager for football operations. Reports are saying that former NFL personnel executive and ex-K-State Wildcat Trey Scott will be brought in as general manager. He'll be the guy that's trying to find that pro-level scouting and recruiting infrastructure to Manhattan, Kansas. And Colin Klein's working quickly to assemble his inaugural staff at K-State. He's bringing over some guys from Texas A&M, including their tight ends coach. But Trey Scott, the new general manager at Kansas State, reports would indicate that the Wildcats are adding that position, which I think that's huge. Anybody that has a general manager in college football, I think, has a leg up on schools that don't.
Yeah, at this point, I'm surprised if they don't. Now, look, whether or not they're called general managers, in some capacity, in some cases, they're not called GMs; they're called something different. But we've talked about this. It's not enough to just have a GM either. You need a personnel department, and this is, I think, why, dipping into the NFL. And if you're Michigan, do you look at that too? Is really beneficial, because hiring a coach with NFL experience, hiring a coach with NBA experience, we've seen that too in college basketball, having a better sense of how those organizations function. That's the key right now. Having a personnel department, having an advanced scouting department. You have to have, when you think about the fact that a lot of these guys know where they're going to go before they enter the portal, because those decisions have already been made. You need scouts that are doing advanced scouting to figure out who's on what team, what guys you need to be looking for. in some cases with tampering going on. We know what's going on. They might even be reaching out to some of those guys early on to say, hey, if you're wanting to go into the portal, now's the time. Now, I'm not suggesting they should be tampering, but we know it's happening. And that's like the reason for that is because these guys know where they're going to go before they enter the portal. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I mean, you need to have a GM, you need to have a scouting department, you need to have, I mean, there's a lot of roles in there that's needed. Advanced scouting, beyond just, the general manager role itself. It's crucial. And, this is to think that Chris Klieman did not have that. That you're falling behind if you don't have anybody in that role.
So Kansas State, I just learned, did have a guy that kind of took on that role for K-State, Clint Brown, but he was more a quality control coach. He didn't have that general manager title, but like Colin Klein he's getting the band back together. I mean, these two guys played together at Kansas State. They were teammates in 2008 and 2009, and Trey Scott is a former backup quarterback. He went to Mill Valley High School, which is in the Kansas City area. He spent 10 years in the NFL with the Raiders, and then he also spent one season with the Washington Commanders, and then he left the NFL and became an agent. He was with XL Sports Management, REP1 Sports, so he was an agent, so he's got ties to a lot of guys that know their stuff in the NFL world, and he will be the next general manager at Kansas State. All right, coming up next, speaking of K-State, we've got Kellis Robinette, the K-State beat writer for the Wichita Eagle and the Kansas City Star, here in about 20 minutes. But how does Texas Tech win the Natty? How can Texas Tech win the national title? We've got some analytics to break down. Also, is this a new era when it comes to the blue chip ratio? He's Ari, I'm James. We are powered by Modelo here on TuneIn and Big 12 Studios. Back inside Big 12 today, your headquarters for the Big 12 Conference. This is the Big 12. This is a different league. He's Ari. I'm James. We've got Will on the controls. We are powered by Modelo. Texas Tech has a bye in the opening round of the college football playoff. Then they get the winner of the Oregon-James Madison game. That is the 5-12 matchup. Now, Texas Tech has a top 10 roster budget in college football, but they are 10th. There are 9 other teams that have a higher dollar figure for their roster. You're seeing a look at the college football playoff bracket on Big 12 Studios. If Texas Tech gets past either Oregon or James Madison, it could be Indiana, it could be Alabama, it could be Oklahoma next. But Cody Campbell is very outspoken, and what you're about to hear is the real backbone of Texas Tech and their rise in Cody Campbell, but it's so much more than just his checkbook. It's coaching, it's player development, it's strategy, and here's what he said about Texas Tech's rise.
So everything started changing in like the summer of 2021. It became a place where there were no rules. You could kind of do whatever you wanted to do. And so what we identified was that there was this gap period, and for a period of time we were going to be able to pay NIL with basically no rules. And so we essentially decided to take advantage of that little window. Several boosters and donors who were interested in supporting, and we said, look, guys, this is our one big opportunity that we're going to have to lean in on this, and maybe the best one we ever have. We can get as much money front-loaded as possible, and then we can also utilize promises of revenue share in addition to that. And so we can go out and acquire as much talent as we want. And so from there, basically went to Coach McGuire and his staff and said, look, guys, here's the opportunity. Here's what we think we need to do. You guys basically tell us what it's going to cost, and we're going to backstop it. And so that's what we executed on. We brought in an analytics consultant to help with that. And then we just use old-fashioned coach evaluations of film. And then when the portal opened, I was just shocked, like, at every position of need, because we hit it so fast and so aggressive. We were able to communicate exactly what the players are getting and exactly when they're going to get it to all their families and to them. We were able to actually get commitments from every one of our top prospects in each position, like within just a few days of the portal opening. Now, it also meant we were going to spend a lot more money than I really anticipated on spending initially, but we were here for it, and again, thought it was a sort of a generational opportunity for us.
So Texas Tech figured out in 2021 what some of the other blue bloods had been doing forever, and they took advantage, and that's how they built this team. Again, they have the 10th most expensive roster in college football, not the most expensive roster in college football. But Bill Connolly from ESPN, his SP Plus ratings, he has Texas Tech as the third best chance of winning the whole thing at 21%. He's got some great reasons why he thinks they can win it all. The metrics really love this football team outside of just what you see on the field.
Yeah, it's really interesting to look at this holistically. Like, so there's a few angles on it. So Bill Connolly basically wrote a piece, and for my money, there's few better at analyzing the sport, both from like a overarching narrative point of view, but also from an analytical point of view. Bill authored the SP Plus. And so, I mean, he comes up with reasons for why all the playoff teams can win the national title and why they won't. And I think the why they will, why they won't for Texas Tech is fairly obvious, but in just digging into some of these numbers, like, it's incredible. Obviously, the reason they will is because their front six, front seven, it's the best in the country when it comes to their defensive line, and then their linebackers and Rodriguez and Roberts. But one of these stats that's insane to me, they've allowed more than 2 offensive touchdowns just once all year to Kansas State in a game they still won by 23. And they've allowed less than 4 yards per play 8 times in 13 games. And then the reason they won't, Connolly writes, is because of their red zone percentage. Something we've talked a lot about this year, that they're at, they score touchdowns in just 56% of the red zone trips, which isn't a problem when you've only given up more than 2 offensive touchdowns in one game. You don't need to score as many touchdowns. So, we'll see if their defense can hold. Look, I think they've got a pretty good draw here. I know a lot of people are picking Oregon to beat them. I just don't see how Oregon can handle that defensive front. I just don't see it. And then Indiana's really good. Indiana just lost one of their top defensive players who, in celebrating the Big Ten championship, tried to jump up in the stands to, high five a Indiana fan and tore his ACL. So, I think overall, I think Texas Tech gets the national championship game. I really do. And it's interesting because the way this thing shakes out, you've got two teams in the bracket that could face each other in the semifinals, in Indiana and Texas Tech, who are not blue chip ratio teams. We talk a lot about the blue chip ratio on this show. The blue chip ratio basically, it's a tool of analysis that, as we've seen throughout the history of the modern recruiting rankings, last 3-4 decades, no team has won a national championship in college football with less than 50% of their roster being 4 or 5-star recruits. So everybody that's won a title has had at least 50% of their roster over a 4-year period be 4 or 5-star recruits. That's the blue chip ratio, and it's held up every year. Texas Tech and Indiana are both teams that are not blue chip ratio teams. So could this be a potential breakthrough season with half of the teams ranked in the top 4, including the Big Ten and Big 12 champion, both not being blue chip ratio teams? As you may have guessed, without having it in front of me, Ohio State and Georgia are probably 1-2 in blue chip ratio, and I want to say they're close to 80%, meaning 80% of their roster is 4 and 5-star recruits. So that'll be the battle. If we see the top 4 in the Final Four this year, then we're guaranteed to see a non-blue chip ratio team play a blue chip ratio team in the national title. And it's happened before. TCU has played for the title and obviously lost to Georgia. There's been a few other examples of it. I think Clemson was at one point not a blue chip ratio team when they lost to Bama, but then they were when they won. But I think that's such an interesting subplot to this because, Bud Elliott, who I think does a really good job in covering the sport for 24/7 Sports and CBS, is sort of the author of the blue chip ratio. And he's often said, it could, he in no way thinks it won't someday be broken. Mm-hmm. But what he always suggested was that it would be broken by an otherworldly quarterback that can kind of lift the team on his shoulders and drag them through. And if it's Tech, maybe Mendoza does that, but if it's Tech, it would seem to be a completely different reason for it. And so I think, when we look at modern college football, this could be a potential breakthrough of, does the transfer portal, is the 12-team playoff, is this new era helping to equalize things from a talent perspective across the board a little bit more that would allow for a team to break through in that capacity?
And he had some fascinating stats that I don't have in front of me, but I can reference later about this recruiting cycle and how much more even it was. Like the House settlement and the ruling that took place. This is the first recruiting class and recruiting cycle post that. And it is more even across the board with less of these teams at the top loading up with 5 stars and 4 stars. It's why you're seeing programs like Texas Tech and BYU and even Houston landing 5-star recruits. And it's a lot more even this year across the board. The Texas Tech piece from SP Plus, a couple of takeaways. You're right about the red zone, and we harp on that a lot. They had 14 red zone trips against top 20 defenses this year, and they only scored 5 touchdowns. So their red zone touchdown rate was even lower against those top 20 defenses. That's only a 36% rate. That has to be a little bit better. But the offense, since Baron Morton got healthy, has seen a massive uptick. They're scoring 41 points per game since he's been healthy. Their ground game has opened up now, with Cameron Dickey and Jacoby Williams both averaging almost 6 yards per carry, collectively almost 150 yards per game on the ground. And then this was the other thing. They have, I think, really underrated wide receivers that can and are capable of making big plays, which you need to win games in the playoff. They've got 4 guys that had between 46 and 55 catches, so about 4 or 5 per game. And all 4 of those guys are 6'2" or taller. So they've got big physical matchup nightmare receivers, and I'm including tight ends in that too, that I think they have enough pieces offensively to make a deep run.
Well, and the biggest concern continues to be the biggest concern, and that's the elephant in the room here, which is Morton's injury history. And so, we knew when, he missed the Arizona State game that was going to be an ongoing issue this season. It obviously has not really come up recently because he's played, but, he's got a broken foot, right? So, I mean, he's playing through a pretty significant injury here that maybe will heal a little bit better as time goes on. Obviously, look, I mean, he hasn't missed more time since the Arizona State game, so, you know, that's good. But that's kind of the elephant in the room here when it comes to, you know, why they won't win a national title. Mm-hmm. It's obvious that if Behren Morton is not able to stay healthy throughout this postseason, that they're not going to be winning a national championship this year, which is true for all of these teams, except that Behren Morton has an injury history here that you have to at least account for.
And that means those 5 elephants up front protecting him, more pressure on them to make sure that he doesn't take unnecessary hits. He's not a threat outside the pocket. He is a pocket passer for Texas Tech here in the postseason. All right, we'll keep it rolling here on Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio. Brought to you the full-time fan by Modelo. Coming up next, we sit down with Kellis Robinett. He is the Kansas State beat writer for the Wichita Eagle and the Kansas City Star to talk all things K-State and what's taking place with the coaching change in Manhattan, Kansas. He's Ari, I'm James. This is Big 12 Radio. This is the Big 12 Conference. This is a different league. Back inside Big 12 today, here on Big 12 Radio, your official home for the Big 12 Conference on TuneIn, TuneIn On Demand, and streaming on your screen on Big 12 Studios. Coaching chaos continues, and in the Big 12, Chris Klieman stepping down as the head coach at Kansas State. The Wildcats moved swiftly to hire Colin Klein. He's reportedly bringing in Trey Scott as the new general manager. Former K-State quarterback Michael Bishop joining the Houston Cougars staff to be reunited with Willie Fritz. And to break it all down, we welcome in Kellis Robinett, the K-State beat writer for the Kansas City Star and the Wichita Eagle. Hey, Kellis, good morning.
Yeah, good morning to you. Thanks for having me on.
All right, where were you when you learned that Chris Klieman might be retiring and that Kansas State was set to hire Colin Klein?
I was getting ready for bed on Tuesday night, the night before everything got official. That's the first I heard about it. Actually, confirming that was a little bit of an obstacle, but yeah, it happened kind of as in a whirlwind. When Kansas State ended the season with a win over Colorado, Chris Klieman seemed to be in pretty good spirits. There were really no indications at all that he was going to retire. There was certainly some fan unrest with people who were disappointed with the 6-6 season, but it seemed like he was dedicated to coming back. He was bringing in a signing class that he worked really hard on, and there was really no alarm bells going off that there was changes coming. But very quickly, between Monday and Wednesday, a very crazy and hectic 48 hours, everything shifted. He decided he was ready to retire. And Kansas State knew exactly who they wanted to bring in, and they worked just as fast to hire Colin Klein. And a week later, here we are. Completely different atmosphere here in Manhattan.
Kellis, I'm curious, what do you think was the impetus for this retirement?
I don't think it's any one thing in particular, but I do think that this season was much more trying on him than maybe some people realize, and I think that's what came out when he had the kind of odd emotional breakdown after they lost a really tough game against Utah, and he was choking back tears and saying that he deserved more respect, and Gene Taylor, the athletic director, had to come up and console him in the middle of everything. That was the first moment to me where I kind of thought, you know what, maybe he is, kind of entering the final stages of his career here, just because this season has been so rough on him. I think that was part of it. And really, I think he is one of those coaches who loved where college football was 5 years ago and doesn't totally embrace where it is now with NIL, transfers, revenue share, and especially money coming into players above revenue share. I think all those things combined with a difficult, trying season. And there has been some episodes in the past where he said he's dealt with some health issues. Add that onto it, and it was just time for him to step away. And at least he said he was at peace with it. He spent the weekend in Fargo, North Dakota, watching his son, who's an assistant coach there. Got to be with some family and kind of enjoy another side of football. So I'm happy that he's at peace with his decision.
Kellis, in terms of the K-State roster and their reaction to Colin Klein getting the Kansas State job, I know the fans are super excited, but how do the players feel about it? And what do you think this means for K-State and their potential retention? They've got a quarterback in Avery Johnson who still has eligibility. Just what does your gut say about all of that?
I mean, it certainly seems like most Kansas State players are happy with who they brought in. Most of the older players on the roster were recruited by Colin Klein, or he was on the staff when they played here. Avery Johnson, the person he called when he first committed to Kansas State, was Colin Klein. Blake Barnett, one of their backup quarterbacks, the person he called when he committed to Kansas State was Colin Klein. He's from Colorado, just like Klein. James Brown, their best wide receiver, same thing. I know one player who was extremely excited that Colin Klein was taking over was former five-star recruit, tight end Lincoln Cure. He went on Instagram after the hire was made official and posted a bunch of pictures of him as a very youth football player, taking pictures with Colin Klein at camps and stuff. So he was fired up about it, and I think it's a good sign that none of the players that Kansas State signed expecting to play for Chris Kleiman have asked out of their commitment and opened up their options because Klein has come back on. So I do think it'll help with retention. There are about 10 players who've already announced that they're going to transfer from last year's roster. Quay Moss, a really talented defensive back, was about the only one that was a significant loss. So I do think in terms of retention, so far at least, it looks like Colin Klein is being embraced. And certainly, like you said, he was the fan choice, the people's champion to come in and be the coach. So no complaints in that regard.
Yeah, and obviously we know this guy knows offensive football. I mean, the K-State offense has not looked as good since he left, and obviously we saw with what he did at A&M. What's your feeling here, Kellis, as somebody that's covered him and covered this team and program for a long time, on how he'd be as a CEO head coach?
Well, part of that remains to be seen. He's never been a head coach before.
Right.
This will be a step up for him. But, I mean, how do you know when you're ready? You never know. And if you're going to take a gamble on a first-time head coach from the Kansas State perspective, there's nobody you'd rather do it on than Colin Klein. I will say, as you mentioned, Chris Kleiman's best years came when Colin Klein was the offensive coordinator. That was the year his first full-time year calling plays is when they won the Big 12 and won the Big 12 in 2022. The next year they won 8 games and went to the Pop-Tarts Bowl and won that as well, though Klein didn't call plays in that game. The game everybody remembers most with Avery Johnson when he scored 5 rushing touchdowns against Texas Tech as a freshman. That was with Colin Klein calling plays. So you would certainly think that he knows ball. He certainly knows the offensive side of things. If he can surround himself with a good staff, and perhaps most importantly, if he can bring in some more players like Deuce Vaughn and Cooper Beebe and Felix and Udike Uzama, who were making plays for that team in 2022 when they won the Big 12, then you'd certainly think that Kansas State could run it back to what they were a few years ago and have more success.
Kellis Robinett joins us here on Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio, your home for the Big 12 Conference, also streaming live on Big 12 Studios. Kellis, there was a lot of chatter this season about Avery Johnson and him not showing off his number one strength, which is rushing the football. Colin Klein carried it like a record number of times for a quarterback. What do you think that looks like next year in terms of Avery Johnson as a runner?
I think we're going to see him run a lot more, and that's assuming he's back. He hasn't publicly said 100% he is back, but Colin Klein has said they've had good conversations. I haven't heard to the contrary. So if he's back and he's the starting quarterback, yes, I think you'll see him run and cut it loose and have more power run QB design plays than we've seen in the past. I think the biggest gripe that fans had this season were most of the designed run plays were, zone read options where Avery had the choice to hand it off, throw, or keep it himself, and very rarely was the choice, I'm going to keep it and run it. When Colin Klein was playing quarterback, he never even had that option. It was snap the ball to him, take off and run, and that's why he scored, like 200 rushing touchdowns. That's an exaggeration, but felt like 200 touchdowns during his playing days at Kansas State. And like I mentioned, when Avery Johnson was a freshman, he had a 5 TD game rushing against Texas Tech. I don't know if they'll use him that much as a runner now that he's the starting quarterback. He was the backup behind Will Howard at that time for that game. But certainly, Colin Klein, I mean, he's run his quarterbacks at Texas A&M. He called running plays for Will Howard and Adrian Martinez when he was the offensive coordinator here. I definitely think that's going to be a big emphasis in his game. And I think you'll see a little bit different approach. It's not going to be totally, stuff on the perimeter, zone read. I think we will see a return to some QB power and some more hardcore running for him.
I'm curious from a basketball perspective, Kellis, Jerome Tang's status and, what he needs to do this season in order to – is he on the hot seat? What does he need to do this season?
Well, I will say one of the biggest favors that Chris Kleiman did by retiring and getting everybody's attention focused on football.
Yeah.
He did a big favor for Jerome Tang there because a lot of the anger that people had about them losing 4 straight basketball games kind of dissipated because they were much more focused on what was going on with football. I mean, it's hard to say if I would say he's on the hot seat, but he definitely needs to have a good showing in Big 12 play here this season. If they only win like 13 or 14 games, which is what they're projected at Ken Palm right now, there's a chance he's not back next season. The team hasn't looked all that good since they started the year with 5 straight wins. They're 6-4, and their only win since their hot start was against Mississippi Valley State, the worst team in all of college basketball. So yeah, I mean, he needs to put a good season here together because they haven't been to the NCAA tournament since his first year in town, and fans won't accept no March Madness trips for too long. So yeah, the pressure is on. I don't know if he's on the hot seat just yet, but the pressure is on for sure.
Yeah, we thought it was interesting that at Colin Klein's press conference, the K-State athletic director, Gene Taylor, said, well, we've hired a head coach without head coaching experience before, and it's worked out pretty well. Talking about Jerome Tang, but K-State was coming off a loss the night before to Bowling Green. So that didn't make
by almost 20 points.
Yeah. What do you think is K-State's ceiling in basketball this season? And if they don't make the tournament, is he back next year?
I think is he back next season? It'll probably depend on how close he gets. Like if they win 20 games and it's thought that Kansas State gets snubbed from the NCAA tournament, then that's probably different than if he wins 15 games and nobody's even paying attention to him. I think he needs to make a run at the NCAA tournament here to be back. Fan apathy is pretty strong. The crowd that came out the other day for the Mississippi Valley State game was probably the smallest I've seen in almost 2 decades covering the team. The student section had maybe 15 people in it when the game started. There's just not a lot of interest there right now, and Kansas State fans want to support basketball. It's one of the things that makes this place neat. They don't just like football; they can be a basketball school too. So, yeah, I mean, he's got to string some wins together here. And like I said, the projections right now aren't too favorable. But I will say when they started 5-0 and pushed Nebraska to the final play for their first loss, there was some hope. I thought they looked better than they did last season. The wheels have kind of fallen off since then, so we'll kind of see if they can fix some things moving forward or not.
Good stuff. Kellis Robinett, the K-State beat writer for the Wichita Eagle and the Kansas City Star. Kellis, appreciate your insight as always, and thanks for hopping on with us this morning.
All right, thanks. You guys have a good one.
You too. It's Kellis Robinett, covers the Kansas State Wildcats for the Wichita Eagle and the Kansas City Star, joining us here on Big 12 today.
I will say the one thing that Jerome Tang has done is beat KU. He's been fairly successful at that, more successful than many of the predecessors at
By
his
many,
position.
all of them. He is the only one who's had success against Kansas.
He's what, 2-0 at home against them?
I think he's 3-0.
3-0, yeah, 3-0. Thank you. Yeah, that. Would you consider that Kansas won at Bramlage for like 100 straight years, give or take? The fact that he's won 3 straight, like, put a statue up of Jerome Tang.
Allen Fieldhouse West.
Yeah,
Bramlage Coliseum. Until Jerome Tang.
that's right.
All right, more to come here on Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio. We are powered by Modelo, heard exclusively on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios and Big12Studios.com. Coaching chaos. Nearly a fourth of Power Conference head coaching jobs will turn over this offseason. Is it a trend? Is it all NIL related? And you'll hear from Willie Fritz and his new staff addition, Michael Bishop, coming up next on Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio. Big 12 Today, brought to you, the full-time fan, by Modelo. Streaming on your screen on Big 12 Studios, the Big 12 Fast channel. You can get us on your Roku, Amazon, Prime Video, DirecTV, YouTube. We are Big 12 Radio for the Big 12 Conference. This is a different league. Special thanks to Kellis Robinette, the K-State beat writer for the Wichita Eagle and the Kansas City Star, who joined us just moments ago. This hour, we'll be talking with Josh Furlong, who's the sports director of KSL and KSL.com. He's a beat writer for Utah Athletics after their $500,000 injection of cash from that private equity firm.
500 what?
Million. What did I say? $500?
1,000.
Did I say 500,000?
Believe so.
500 million.
Yeah. I heard 1,000. I might be wrong.
$1 billion.
Half a billion.
500 mil.
Yeah.
Will is the ultimate hype man. He just offered to bring me my coffee mid-segment.
I told him he should feed it to you.
Through a straw. Straws only? Look, he's getting the coffee right now, which, by the way...
I love how you did that as a reminder. Like, by the way, Will, I don't know if you know the coffee's ready, so...
Coffee's over there. Just heard the beep.
Get up
Look
and
at this.
give
Is
me
he even
this?
going to be in the shot? He's not even in the shot. He's handing it to me. Will, this is fantastic. All-American producer fill-in Will. Look at that. There it is. Ready to go. We've almost drank 100 coffee K-cups.
That'll be quite the celebration.
Boy, will it ever. I'm excited about it, as are you. You bring your own coffee. You don't drink from the house coffee.
The problem is...
You got a problem with my pods, bro?
Yes. No, it's because it gets too cool too quickly. This tumbler with the top keeps it warmer,
Yeah.
hotter.
Well, if you drink a cup a segment, it never gets cool. Just a deep sigh.
I don't need you questioning my life choices, okay?
Don't question my life choices.
Everything has a reason.
All right, we will be picking our Big 12 Today all-conference teams, and we can go through a different position group each day. We'll start today with quarterbacks and running backs. Ari's hair will be on fire when he hears who my third team all-Big 12 quarterback is. Speaking of that, hey, Willie Fritz, the Houston head coach, this is what he said, because you brought up an interesting point of discussion. They have a 5-star quarterback coming in, the number 1 rated quarterback in the class of 2026. They also have a former 5-star in Connor Wegman, who's a local kid who's going to be a senior next year and in his last year. And Willie Fritz was asked about, hey, is Connor Wegman, is he going to come back in 2026? What's going on there?
You know, I think he's had an outstanding year. You know, they had all conference team the other day, and we had a lot of guys that made it. And you know, I'm very excited about the guys that made first team, second team, honorable mention. I thought Connor had an outstanding season. I was, you know, disappointed he didn't make something. But, you know, that's, you know, kind of how it goes. There's a lot, you know, the difference with the Big 12 opposed to other conferences, we got 16 teams. You know, I've been in some conferences where I was in one conference, I think we had 7. You know, is that right, Joseph? The junior college league, you know.
Yeah, I think there was.
We didn't have very many, and you know, and they had 3 teams maybe, and shoot, you had a pretty good chance of maybe making something. This league, it's tough. It's tough to make something in the Big 12 with 16 quality teams. So, yeah, we're pumped about him coming back. It's you know, we're going to be running the same system. He's going to be you know, a lot of these guys, he knows what they do good, and you know, working with them throughout the spring and the summer, and you know, obviously finishing this ball game is very, very important. But we're very, very excited about having Connor back and leading our team. He's I think he's had a fantastic season, and so we're very, very happy that he's going to be back with us. And I don't think there's ever any question about that, but it's great that he'll be with us.
Well, I think we got our answer, that Connor Wegman is QB1. And, I mean, Willie Fritz was pretty direct there in that he'll be back, another year in the system, thought he had a fantastic year. He's our quarterback.
Yeah, and, you know, I mean, fantastic relative to what they had last year, Willie Fritz's first year, there's no doubt about that. I mean, this was a bad team last year or 2 years ago, or whatever you want to call it, in Willie Fritz's first season, that had major issues with quarterback and guys in and out of lineup. You know, they had more consistency at the position. I mean, there's no question he was a dramatic upgrade, and there's a reason that they were 9-3, and he played a huge role in that. And look, even though I brought up the fact that down the stretch of the season he had some big time clunker games. You know, TCU game was bad. The Texas Tech game was obviously bad. UCF game was not good, where he had 3 picks. I mean, Fritz brought up the fact that, okay, next year will be the second year in the same system, which should help him. No doubt about that. The other part to that, though, too, is that there's an offseason for defensive coordinators around this league to watch film of what he did last year and kind of take that away. You know, his running ability was what made him the quarterback that he was. I mean, you could argue all of the best quarterbacks in the league this year were more running than passing and dual threat guys. You look at Devin Dampier and Bear Bachmeier. I mean, there's a good list of guys that were, you know, very legit dual threat guys, and many of them overly reliant on their legs, and I think Wegman's one of them. But with the guy that just comes in as the number 1 overall prospect, I mean, you got to give him a chance to compete. You know, so, I mean, he says that, and of course he says that now.
Sure.
You know, we'll see how the spring goes, and I haven't seen if Keyshawn Henderson's going to be an early enrollee. I'm expecting him to be. And get on campus for spring and then fall camp. But yeah, I would think you've got a guy that's, I mean, he shot up the rankings and he earned every bit that number 1 overall ranking. Remember, he was at first thought to be a wide receiver, or running back. You know, he was not being recruited initially as a quarterback, Keyshawn Henderson. And Willie Fritz is the guy, similar to how he handled the Michael Bishop situation when he was at Blinn, who felt like he was a quarterback all along. It's a big reason why Henderson decided to go to Houston. And, you know, as the story goes, Henderson didn't even know throughout the process that Willie Fritz coached Michael Bishop, his coach in high school, until after he had committed. Mm-hmm. But he earned every bit that number 1 overall ranking. I mean, he moved up in terms of being recruited as a running back, wide receiver, and just kept ascending. And this year was a big year for him in order to prove that he was a legit 5-star, one of the top quarterbacks, and all he did was become the number 1 overall prospect. So, I mean, you'd be crazy not to see what he can do, especially, again, against, I mean, no disrespect to Connor Wegman, but, like, he's heading into his 4th year of playing college ball. He's had a lot of injuries, but, like, this is kind of what he is at this point. He's a former 5-star. That's all he is. Most former 5-stars go on to play at their school for 3 years and then go to the NFL. That's the path of a 5-star. So, especially at that position. So, you know, again, I think you'd be crazy to not have him compete, you know, starting from day one.
Well, I would definitely figure out a way to get him on the field. Maybe in the same way that Utah used Bird Ficklin at times this season. And, again, this is now 2 years in a row that nearly half of the teams in the Big 12 Conference saw their backup quarterback getting significant snaps, either because the starter got hurt or because the starter didn't play up to the level of expectations needed for that position. Texas Tech had multiple guys at quarterback. Devin Dampier missed a game at Utah. At Houston, right there at Houston, Connor Wegman got knocked out of the game against Texas Tech. Arizona State without Sam Leavitt. UCF, rotation of quarterbacks. West Virginia, Colorado, Oklahoma State, that is literally half of the league. 8 teams played multiple quarterbacks this season, and that's the second year in a row. It was 7 last year in the Big 12. So having a quarterback of this pedigree is a really good thing for Houston.
Yeah, and, you know, I mean, look, it's a physical sport. You're going to have to deal with adversity at the position. I mean, certain teams have luck, but, I mean, there's no question that quarterback injuries, I would think, played a role at the top of the conference. I mean, if Arizona State had been healthy all year with the quarterback position, who knows what they could have done. I mean, that's the only team to beat Texas Tech with Sam Leavitt at starting. So I think it's fair to say that the injuries to the quarterback position, you know, helped to set in motion what ended up being a Big 12 championship.
definitely shows the value of that position when that Texas Tech Arizona State game. Sam Levitt starts for Arizona State.
Yeah.
Baron Morton misses that game for Texas Tech, and Arizona State gave Texas Tech their only loss. We were talking earlier on the program about the coaching chaos and the Sharon Moore situation at Michigan, which today I learned he's from Derby, Kansas, which is a Wichita, Kansas suburb. But I've started.
You ever been to the dinosaur park in Derby, Kansas?
I have not. Have you?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, tell me about that. Let's not bury the lead here.
I mean, Derby, Kansas is known for its dinosaur park.
the dinosaur park capital of the world?
Yeah, Google it. They've got this huge park. There's like, I don't know what they're made out of, clay giant dinosaurs roaming around.
Life size?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wait, roaming around.
Sorry, not roaming. They're just stationary.
Okay, they're stationary dinosaurs. I was going to say, that's a whole, I don't know if we want to do that.
You're like, Derby is a Jurassic Park?
Core Memories Nightmare City for my kids.
Like,
all right?
We've literally seen this movie 5 times.
I've traumatized them enough by yelling at them to go to bed. Don't need to take them to
Wait till I send you to the Jurassic Park in Derby, Kansas.
If you don't go to bed right now, I'm sending you back to that dinosaur park. So I started scouring the web to see if there's any like Big 12 names for this Michigan opening. I went to the Detroit Free Press, which I always start local first when it comes to candidates. No Big 12 coach mentioned. Like they're talking Jed Fish, Washington, Kalen DeBoer, Alabama, Jace Minter, who is the LA Chargers defensive coordinator under Harbaugh, was a Royals finalist. He was the defensive coordinator for the 2022-23 team that finished first in the nation. And then how about this? Would they take a stab and would he leave Kurt Cignetti, Indiana head coach? Would he go to Michigan?
I don't think so, but I mean, it's crazy to think that there's a coach in Indiana that wouldn't leave for Michigan. You know, like that
right.
Used to be the sought-after job. Look, I think if you're a fan of the Big 12, you have to hope that he hires Jace Minter, right? Because we've already seen the type of domino effect that hiring the Washington coach can have. And that's it, right? Like even if it's not Jed Fish, but if it's somebody else, and by the way, I think Jed Fish would want that job. You know, if it's somebody else in college, you have to not just think about that move, but then the subsequent moves where another job becomes open, and then who are they looking for in that situation? So you almost have to hope that it's the Chargers defensive coordinator, because that wouldn't have as much of a domino effect on college football as hiring a sitting head coach in college football right now.
Will, who is the candidate that you texted us a few minutes ago?
Jay Harbaugh.
Jay Harbaugh.
Producer
Okay.
Will, yeah.
Producer Will, who's Jay Harbaugh?
You are asking me. Okay, so Jay Harbaugh, based off a Yahoo Sports article I looked up,
Yeah.
with the Seattle Seahawks, right? So he's a special teams coordinator, and he's under, of course, the former Michigan assistant, Mike McDonald. Before joining Seattle after the 2024 season, he worked at Michigan.
He's Jim's son.
Yes.
Jim Harbaugh's
Yeah,
son.
I figured that.
Yeah. He's not the third brother of Jim.
How many Harbaughs are there?
A lot.
Dozens of Harbaughs. He's the special teams coordinator for the Seahawks.
And they're elite on special teams.
They're elite. They're elite on special teams, Will says. Best special teams in the NFL.
I mean, look,
They're a good football team.
he's got a last name that indicates he could probably coach football. He's
Yeah.
36 years old. That one is I love it, Will. I don't know. Did you find this as a candidate, or were you just looking for Harbaugh's?
So I was looking for candidates, and one article had this as.
Got it.
Did you
and
Google
they also-
will Michigan hire Harbaugh, and this is what came up?
No, it was a credible source.
Credible
and
source.
the same article also said Kalen DeBoer's name is going to be brought up. So it will be interesting to see. But no, I just was looking at articles. Who's going to be the coach? Because obviously the cycle's over. So
I also think, like, if you're Michigan, don't you have to kind of free yourself from that era? Like, if you're hiring the Chargers DC or you're hiring Jay Harbaugh, like, isn't it time now to separate yourself from that era? Not just with the Connor Stallions thing, but now with this. And this is going to hang over the program. Like, we don't even know the specifics of what, the alleged assault is for.
But he was arrested. Apparently he was arrested, and this is in the police report. He was arrested at an Ann Arbor, apartment complex.
Yeah, and look, there's lots of rumors flying around there on the internet that may be substantiated. We'll see. Time will tell. And then we can come on here and talk about them as they're, as it's fact. But at this point, they're all rumors, and nothing has been substantiated from, police reports. Obviously have to be very careful about that stuff when you talk about it publicly.
Right. I also think Sharon Moore definitely doesn't know that who he follows on Instagram is public for anybody to see.
How could you not?
Maybe he's just really bad at life.
Or maybe he didn't care.
Like, you're the head coach at Michigan, and you're following a bunch of like random college girls and models. Like, that's not the move.
I wonder what his DMs look like.
There's a lot of smoke there.
Yeah, and honestly, at this point, that just it's like that's like so far down the line of transgressions here. It obviously indicates a behavior, but this is a wild story when it hit. It just kept getting wilder and wilder as the night progressed. The details, like he was arrested without any details initially. And then so you started to see all of these different people without much of a social media following kind of reporting on it. And so you're trying to be careful to make sure that whatever you are hearing is credible. It sort of shows in many ways the toxicity of the modern environment in media, where when things are unknown, people can come up with wild allegations and stories and then other people pick up and run with it. It's like a huge game of telephone, and then think about how much worse it could get over time with AI and deep fakes. Scary stuff, man.
Yeah. Dan Wolken from Yahoo is reporting that, and this is just kind of a rapid-fire headlines segment. Yesterday we were talking about Notre Dame. So tired of talking about Notre Dame, but Notre Dame is still a big story. So after this little press tour that they've had and getting this preferential playoff access if they finish in the top 12, athletic directors in other leagues are rallying together and threatening to freeze Notre Dame out of future schedules. Who are you going to play, Notre Dame?
So what's really interesting is I started to hear some stuff following this ACC piece that there was going to be some interest for the Big 12, and that some athletic directors with the Big 12 were sort of wondering aloud with Brett Yormark if they should make a pitch to Notre Dame to join the league in that same capacity as the ACC. If they're unhappy with the ACC, we talked about this earlier in the week, that the Big 12 could be a good landing spot. Brett Yormark is extremely calculated and smart. Obviously when we have him on, just think about any of his public appearances. The things that he say are very so the fact that he called out Notre Dame and Pete Bavacqua very publicly like he did and created headlines, that was his response, I would believe, to athletic directors in the conference that wanted to pursue Notre Dame, which basically meant that's not going to happen. What's interesting now is we're further away from that moment is I don't know that there's ever an example of anybody in this space pushing back against Notre Dame like that publicly.
Yeah.
Even the ACC stuff that Pete Bavacqua was upset about is justifiable given they're going to stand up for Miami. And it wasn't that they were, negative on Notre Dame. It was more standing up for Miami. Notre Dame didn't like that. And so that's followed up with a major conference commissioner, a major player in this, basically saying his actions were egregious and that should not be acceptable. He threw a freaking temper tantrum. Good on Brett Yormark for standing up to Notre Dame, but if this is true, what Dan Wolken and Yahoo Sports are reporting, that's significant. Because if Notre Dame leaves the ACC, or if the ACC says, we don't need to deal with this, and doesn't continue the scheduling alliance, and by the way, look at the ratings. Notre Dame is not as big of a draw as Notre Dame thinks they are.
Right.
The top most viewed college football games this year, I don't think they're in the top 20. They're in the top 25.
And also because they don't play anybody as is. And if they lose the ACC, that schedule only gets weaker and weaker.
It's sort of inexplicable that Notre Dame has been able to wield the type of power they've been able to wield over college football for as long as they have, and it feels like now they're finally getting pushed back in a way that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. By the way, the gap between the Big 12 championship game and the ACC, massive. The Big 12 championship brought in 9 million viewers. The ACC, 3.9. This was the most watched Big 12 championship game since 2022, and the Big 12 championship viewership was up 30% year over year.
Well, and it was a blowout, right? I mean, the first half was close, but the second half was a complete blowout.
And the ACC goes into overtime, and we still almost triple them in viewership.
And we've seen, I mean, classic games in the Big 12 championship, with Oklahoma State and Baylor. I mean, there's been some really good ones. So, look, there's always different circumstances that go into these ratings. You're always going to see the SEC and the Big Ten at the top. I don't know that I've seen the Big Ten's number because these numbers were released by ESPN and Disney, which obviously does not have Fox. But, yeah, it's a big-time number. And I expect that to continue to grow as the Big 12 becomes more of a, known brand with high-level teams like Texas Tech. But it's a big-time number.
Very big. Peaked at over 11 mil at one point during the game.
It also helps, by the way, that there's 100,000 people in the stadium, or 90-some-odd thousand, and you turn on the ACC championship game, it's like empty. I mean, it would have been a different story if the ACC championship was Clemson versus Florida State. It would have been, but it wasn't. It was Duke and Virginia. So that's why the numbers bore out what they bore out.
More to come here on Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio, heard exclusively on TuneIn. Before we chat with Josh Furlong, sports director of KSL, beat writer for Utah Athletics, we will start the process of unveiling our Big 12 today all-conference teams. He's REM James. This is Big 12 Radio, powered by Modelo, exclusively on TuneIn and Big 12 Studios. Josh Furlong, the sports director of KSL and beat writer for Utah Athletics, will join us around 8:40 Central Time here on Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio. He is Ari Timken. I'm James Westling. We are powered by Modelo. What do you got going on over there? What's going on over there?
Just doing some final tallies.
Okay.
On my Big 12 quarterbacks, first, second, and third teams, of course.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's my favorite thing. What are you doing on your phone? That's the question of the day to everybody, not just you.
You know what the answer is? Nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing important. It's just an extra extremity that I'm at different times like, I should look to see what's going on there.
Just checking your things.
Just checking my things.
Checking your things.
So important, James.
When you open your phone, what's the first app you're hitting? Like when you're checking your things.
Depends.
Is it Twitter? Is it email?
Yes. So I don't have Twitter on my phone. I have to delete it. So sometimes, and like Instagram, I do the same thing. I like delete Instagram from my phone. I like to delete apps on my phone so that I forget that. Then I'll go on them when they're deleted from my phone.
So you're getting on Twitter and Instagram via desktop, PC, old school.
Old school. That's right.
Old school. All right, we've got our Big 12 Today all-conference teams.
What's your go-to?
Probably email first. I'd say email first, yeah. Definitely email.
Got it.
Pretty much just email.
Not messages for you guys?
Not Tinder?
Well,
You're not checking your Tinder first? That one was for Lacey.
she'll love that. Yeah. No, I'm not. I don't know what that
I don't
is.
have that on my phone. I don't know what you're talking about.
I actually don't, and I don't know what that is. That'll be a fun discussion later today. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Big 12 today.
I'm always looking out for you.
You always are. Always are. Pretty sure she's got like Amazon delivery drivers in a group chat. We are getting so many packages daily. Dozens of packages.
I love that you're like
Dozens.
You just did some ahead math. Like, how can I combat the egregious comments from my co-host Ari about Tinder?
We'll talk about the package deliveries. There's too many. I thought we were done with Christmas shopping. I was told weeks ago, we had 15 packages the other day. I counted them. 3 of them were for me. I'm in charge of the throwback jerseys for the kids. That's my thing, NFL jerseys. She's got everything else covered. She loves to Christmas shop. She loves to wrap gifts. I think she's ordering things just to have more gifts to wrap. It's like very therapeutic for her. She does a whole system. It's a whole setup. But 15 packages, Ari, in one day. Okay? That's too many. That's too many.
I think you might use that as a reason for why you should have a shared Amazon account so you can make sure you're checking what she's buying.
Yeah, I suggested that. It got shut down immediately.
Yeah.
Immediately.
That'd be a non-starter for me.
All right, Big 12 Today all-conference teams. Today we're going to hit on quarterbacks and running backs. We've got first team, second team, and third team. We don't honorable mention. Not everybody gets a participation trophy.
That's right, James.
All right, first, second, and third team. Why don't you kick us off here? We can start with quarterbacks. You want to go third team to first team or first to third? You tell me.
Well, third to first.
Okay.
What are you, crazy? All right, so
It's a very reasonable question.
my third team quarterback is Bear Bachmeier, the true freshman quarterback for BYU, who put up 3,200 yards of total offense, 25 total touchdowns, 14 pass, 11 rush. He only threw 6 interceptions as a true freshman. You could argue, obviously, from a quarterback perspective, BYU didn't ask him to do a ton in terms of throwing the football, but when you think about a true freshman and teams are zeroed in on stopping him and his running ability, they still couldn't stop it. His 76.7 QBR is third in the conference behind only Devin Dampier and Brendan Sorsby. Yeah, I mean, he was at 97 total points from a quarterback perspective in terms of his rushing and throwing ability. Third team for me would be Bear Bachmeier, the quarterback for BYU.
Like it. I like it. Don't know if I love it, but I like it. My third team Big 12 quarterback, and I was on the fence between two guys, is Connor Wegman at Houston. And I know you're going to love this pick. And let me tell you why before you just annihilate me.
Well, why not go with the better running quarterback who had the more wins? Sorry, go ahead.
Listen, Houston went 9-3. Okay, they went 6-0 on the road. You have to have a dude in this conference to win on the road, and they went 6-0 in Big 12 games only. sorry, I'm not going to include all the stats that these guys pile up against Arkansas Pine Bluff, but Connor Wegman in league games was top 3 in the Big 12 in passing efficiency. He was top 4 in the league in completion rate.
What's completion rate?
Completion percentage.
Got it.
He was the 3rd leading rusher in the Big 12 in rushing touchdowns among any players, running backs, quarterbacks. He was by far, on paper, the best rushing quarterback in this conference, even better than Devin Dampier. On paper. His yards per game, he had almost 700 yards on the ground. He didn't throw the football. He didn't have as many attempts as some of the other guys in the league. But I think to go on the road and go 6-0, have 11 rushing touchdowns on the season, 21 passing touchdowns, to lead Houston to a 9-3 season. And NFL scouts actually really love his arm strength, his lower body strength. He's got a 6'3 profile, a quick release. He could be a pro. Connor Wegman is my 3rd-team quarterback.
I don't know why you're being so sensitive about it.
I'm very sensitive about it. The opening segment, all you're talking about is Connor Wegman and how overrated he is.
Well,
and I've got him as my 3rd-team All Big 12 quarterback.
All I simply said is the number 1 prospect
you hate
in
him?
college football.
Said he was the worst quarterback of all time, the most overrated quarterback you've ever laid your eyes on.
All right, should we move on to second team?
Yeah, second team.
Also, last thing I'll say of this is, there's another quarterback who's a dual threat guy who had more yardage total, more touchdowns, and had a better record. But, why put him on this list, Go with the guy with less stats and less wins. Number 2 for me is Brendan Sorsby.
He had all league wide receivers that he's throwing the football to. Connor Wegman had a tight end and a guy named Amari Thomas, who's a UAB transfer.
Stud. Big time season.
Right, who's your second teamer?
You should have thrown it more then. Brendan Sorsby for me, number 2. Now look, similar to last year, this team lost a bunch of games down the stretch of the season, but 27 touchdowns, the 5 interceptions, a 62% completion percentage, 155 passer rating. Number 2 in the Big 12 in QBR at 81.4. I think in terms of efficiency, in terms of dual threat ability, that Sorsby was it. And obviously, again, he had some big-time games earlier in the season and did not have as many later. And we'll see if he stays at Cincinnati, because he's going to get a lot of offers, as we know, to go elsewhere for a lot of money. And the former Indiana quarterback, Brendan Sorsby, number 2 on my list.
Major uptick year 2 in that system for Scott Satterfield this year. My second team All Big 12 quarterback is Utah's Devin Dampier. 12 touchdowns and 12 picks last year at New Mexico. His first season at Utah, 22 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions. Also had almost 700 yards on the ground, had 7 rushing touchdowns. He was named the Big 12 Offensive Newcomer of the Year. The official release had him as 3rd team All Big 12, but just his dual threat ability, he's also a gamer. Like, he had some of his biggest games when Utah needed it most. He willed Utah to victory against Kansas State late in the season. I think he's underrated as a passer. I know that his offensive coordinator from New Mexico came with him, but that's still an entirely new team around him that he has to get adjusted to. I thought he was fantastic. I've got Devin Dampier as my second team All Big 12 quarterback.
Yeah, and this Dampier, for me, it came down to Dampier and Bachmeier for my 3rd team. So I like that pick a lot. Certainly a guy that should get recognized. Had a really good season. I believe he was 3rd team for the Big 12.
He was, officially.
With Sorsby at 1 and Fafita at 2, or the other way around? I can't remember off the top of my head. All right, should we move on to first team?
Yeah, who's your first team?
That'd be Noah Fafita. Fafita, 2,900 yards, 26 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 64% completion percentage. He had, a 71.3 top half of the league QBR, 148.5 passer rating, and consistently graded out. He was one of the top quarterbacks that PFF graded in terms of accuracy. And then, I go to, of these teams we're talking about here, who was like matching, best performer with best outcome. Granted, BYU had a better outcome of the season this year than Arizona, but I think overall, Fafita was the better, more well-rounded quarterback that Bachmeier was. So in weighing Sorsby with Fafita, I'm looking at team over individuals. And look, you could Sawyer Robertson, Josh Hoover, two guys that put up big-time numbers for this league that are not going to be recognized on either of our lists. So I think team success has a lot to do with this too, with taking nothing away from Sawyer Robertson because he had a big-time year and couldn't help the fact that the rest of the team was not good around him. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. Fafita was, on a really good team that had, good offensive line play, blocked well for their running game, and then a opportunistic defense, which Baylor and TCU did not have.
Yeah, the thing that shied me away from Sawyer Robertson and Josh Hoover, even with all the yards, when you look at their league games only, both of those guys had double-digit interceptions. They had too many picks. Like Josh Hoover had 11, Sawyer Robertson had 10, and I also have Noah Fafita as my first-team All-Big 12 quarterback, which he was officially from the conference, the first-team guy. He's also
Sorsby was 2?
Sorsby was 2.
Got it.
Correct.
Okay. They got it right.
He's also the Polynesian Player of the Year. He is a finalist for that award. But, 26 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions, low interception rate, incredibly accurate. His decision-making was sky high, and he became Arizona's first-team all-conference quarterback since 1975. Noah Fafita, our first-team quarterback.
A very interesting list, and again, to kind of wrap a bow around the quarterback position in 2025, we headed into the season thinking this was the year of the quarterback of the Big 12. We thought this could be a big year for Sam Levitt and for Sawyer Robertson, maybe even for Josh Hoover. The season kind of started out that way, and what we ended up seeing, like I would say, if you had showed me this list and said when we get to the end of the year, this is going to be our lists, I'd be like, whoa, what happened?
Same.
Like what? How? Huh? What? And I think there are some positions as we go through every position that are going to be much more difficult than others. Mm-hmm. And not to say the quarterback wasn't difficult, but there just wasn't any like I guess Fafita was the standout guy, but still, it's arguable, right? I mean, you could have made the case that Sawyer Robertson should be first team All Big 12 quarterback. Sawyer Robertson couldn't help the fact that he had to throw all the time, that they had no running ability, and that they couldn't play defense.
Yeah.
So some of the high numbers in interceptions are attributable to that. And for Fafita, he benefits greatly from the running game and the defense they had, which just goes to show again that, you're only as good as the team around you, as football is the ultimate cohesion sport, it's the ultimate team sport. But it's just an interesting commentary on the quarterback position and what we thought it would be going into the season and how it's ended up. The Big 12 is not going to have any NFL quarterbacks coming out in the NFL draft this year. We thought heading into the season we could have, 2 first-round picks potentially, and as it ends, who knows where Sawyer Robertson ends up getting drafted, and I think some team may end up getting a steal with a guy that, did not have a great last year but has a ton of potential. And then obviously we'll see what Sam Levitt does. But, yeah, it was just a weird year. We thought going in it was the year of the quarterback. It ended up being a year of the running back. The best teams in the Big 12 were the best running teams in the Big 12. And that may not change.
Very much so. Very much so. Complimentary football. All right, we've got Josh Furlong standing by, sports director of KSL and beat writer for Utah Athletics. He's coming up next. That's Ari. I'm James. This is Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio. 12 today here on Big 12 Radio. Heard exclusively on TuneIn, watching us on Big 12 Studios. We've got Josh Furlong in the house, sports director and beat writer at KSL covering Utah athletics. He's an AP Top 25 voter. He is a Heisman voter. And Josh writes about Utah partnering with a private equity firm. And Josh, you said that it's simple but complex at the same time. It's way over my head. So break this down for us. What's going on with this private equity firm that Utah Athletics is teaming up with?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people hear private equity, especially in, the Big Ten was dealing with it and everything and trying to infuse cash into athletics. And it worries people because you hear of the typical stuff with private equity where they just come in, they don't get the revenue that they want, and then they gut companies and everything. This one is a little different, right? Well, what Utah's essentially doing is they're signing with a private equity firm to just get an infusion of cash. We still don't know what percentage that is in terms of what they're bringing, but they're using them as a minority owner of this company that they're creating that's a for-profit arm of the athletic department, where they can get donors to essentially put their money in and invest in the University of Utah athletics program. And so what this does is essentially just this big little boost for the University of Utah. They get their opportunity to be able to get the cash that they need to be able to remain, net positive in revenue and everything that way, while still getting an equity firm that also is very well versed in sports management and sponsorship deals and growing products without having maybe some of the negative downfalls of a program or an equity firm that basically just dictates everything, right? And so Utah still owns majority share. They still own everything. And so it's really just kind of partnering the two to be able to help each other so that Utah can live in this world where you have the $20 million rev share. You've got opportunities now with NIL where instead of donors essentially just burning cash, they now can invest in the program, and then those donations can be kind of used that way. So it's like you said, it's simple but complex. It's obviously a lot of layers to it, but at the end of the day, they feel like they've struck a good arrangement where they're not so beholden to a private equity firm that, if things don't meet certain checkpoints, they're suddenly going to be gutted, and now the University of Utah is in a world of hurt.
Yeah, and I mean, in professional sports, Josh, you've got like the business side, the commercial side, and then you've got the sports side, right? Like the personnel department. And normally, if you've got like a CEO of a professional sports team, like they're not exactly, wading over into the waters on the personnel side. And that's what seems to be the case here in this situation here. They're bringing them in, and they're coming in from a private equity standpoint because they see what would appear to be some low-hanging fruit from a revenue standpoint when it comes to sponsorships, ticketing, premium experiences, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, these, the $20 million rev share for a lot of these programs isn't going to be sustainable, right? I mean, I think it's tough to be able to suddenly get universities to be able to pay something like that. And so this is kind of what they felt would be the best option to be able to get the infusion of cash, where it's similar to kind of like a startup business where, hey, we need capital to be able to operate. Once we can kind of get ourselves established, this allows us to be able to continually move forward, get the sponsorship deals that we need. I mean, this is a group that has partnered with the Dallas Cowboys and the Cleveland Browns and helped them grow. And so they have these ideas of what true sponsorship looks like, true NIL, so to speak, to be able to help it, maximize potentials and understand what needs to be done. And so that's kind of what they feel. They feel like this is a true partnership where it's not just, hey, we have to meet a certain demand or the private equity firm is going to gut us. It's both are now, vested partners, so to speak, to be able to make this thing grow. The ultimate goal here is for Utah to probably try to get into a P2 conference, right? I mean, I think that's where the value of this deal really maximizes itself. If Utah can find itself, let's say in the Big Ten, or they can find themselves in some other area, maybe that's what helps them. And I know that's tough for anybody in the Big 12 to be thinking of, right? I mean, I think that's tough. I think everybody wants to be able to stay connected and everything. But I think Utah's looking at this not even just from a narrow mindset of saying, hey, we have to get to a different destination. It's putting themselves in a position where if there's more conference realignment and there's some world where, a Power 2 structure or some level of break off happens, they're in a position where they feel like they can be financially, in a situation that works, well as also having little check marks that help them along the way.
So you think Utah is still angling for the Big Ten, or would that power to, are you talking long term, like a complete reshaping of college football to where, the Big 12 is, or there's a super league or something crazy like that?
Yeah, I don't think it's in particular like, hey, they have to get to the Big Ten. I used Big Ten because that was kind of the name that was always thrown around what Utah would hope to be. But I think it's more just positioning themselves for whatever that future landing spot is, right? Whether that is that super conference, it could still be, 64 team Power Four, but now it looks like, a super league or whatever that may be. I mean, I think it's really positioning themselves in a way where they can be a lot more nimble. And if there is a situation where there's a breaking point, maybe Utah gets called up into that area, right? And I think there's nothing that's been said outwardly, or there's nothing that's been said publicly that, hey, we're shooting for the Big Ten. They love being in the Big 12 as much as, the rhetoric around the team has been that they don't want to be in the Big 12. They do. They love this. In the Board of Trustees meeting, there were some hesitations from moving from the Big Pac-12 to the Big 12. There was a lot of those hesitations, and there was one member of the board specifically that says, we've loved our association with Big 12 after having early hesitations. I don't think that's lip service. I think, those people speaking in that setting, they truly love where they're at, but I think you'd be unwise to not be looking to the future to understand that this landscape probably will change, and trying to figure out what that may be.
Yeah, well said. I think everybody's doing themselves a disservice to not be positioning yourselves for the best situation in the future, and especially given, the financial realities of the Big 12, where, from a television revenue standpoint, the biggest driver of revenue, Big 12 teams are at a major, as the ACC is, major disadvantage relative to the Big 10 and the ACC. Josh Furlong from KSL Sports joining us here on Big 12 Radio, Big 12 Today, presented by Modelo. Josh, I'm curious if you've thought about this part of it. So we talk about the rev share from the university. If the university has spun off this LLC business arm, are they then also a part of that, or could they theoretically take some of this money and invest it from a advertising standpoint into some of their players in order to procure them greater dollars? Because we know the true NIL side of this thing is where, schools create major advantages. Is this a potential loophole with an LLC brand that sort of allows them to go outside of the rev share piece?
See, and that's kind of where I've been trying to get more information, because in my thoughts, because they are outside of that, in theory, Utah could create their own brand, right? Like, clearly Utah is a brand. That's what all athletic programs are, a brand. But can they create a brand in and of themselves and say, we are the Utah brand, and then say, hey, we're going to sign every athlete as a brand ambassador and pay them X amount of dollars? That to me feels like an easy loophole. I don't know if that's going to be legalized. I don't know if that's something that they feel like they can do, but based on kind of how I interpret it is exactly what you said, right? Like, it's exactly that there's potential where they can utilize their own brand to be able to sign their own NIL deals and make this work. So we'll see. I mean, I think there's still a lot of questions that relate to this and whether they're able to solidify that. But at the end of the day, like, this has been approved by the Board of Trustees. They've gotten the direction to move forward, but they still haven't signed the official contract yet. They haven't gotten the full infusion of cash. Some of that cash has come because donors have already stepped up, but it remains to be seen what that actual relationship will be like. And if so, that remains a massive loophole that Utah can utilize that other schools just don't have. And so I think that part of it, especially if other programs can structure it the way that Utah does, that becomes a completely different level of NIL play that, continues to make this more the wild, wild west.
Josh, do you think this means that Kyle Whittingham comes back next season?
I don't know that this deal in particular makes it that, he comes back. There's been a lot of back and forth with Kyle on whether he wants to retire, whether he wants to go another year. And I think he struggles himself whether he wants to be able to maintain, his relationship with football versus just completely going all in on family. He's created an environment where family and football completely mix. And so it's not one or the other in a lot of ways with him. And so I don't know that this deal in particular does anything outside of just knowing that you have more resources now to be able to help your program. So for me, it's really just going to come down to if he really feels like he can walk away. It's hard to be able to say after you've been in the program for 30 plus years that you can step away from football. So I think that really comes down to it. The NIL side of it or the private equity side, although a compelling side, I don't know that that's the reason why Kyle would come back.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's dig further into this. What are your thoughts on that? Obviously, this hangs over the program every year, it seems like. And I mean, do you think at this point, with a decision sort of not out there, that this means he will be back?
It's funny because I've talked to a bunch of different people that really just don't know. Going into the final game of the season when Utah was at Kansas, everything kind of lined itself up with him leaving. Like there was just different things that were being done,
right,
that made it so that like I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it entirely. I mean, like the way that he interacted with his family and them being there, that was completely different. And so you go from that to coming back and giving himself a chance to be able to kind of think about it after the season. And suddenly you start getting word that he, maybe would contemplate coming back. And so by all accounts, it sounds like he wants to come back. I think the question is, does he have the donor support? Does he have the coaching support? Does he have all of that kind of support to be able to continue the run? Which sounds crazy for
right.
a coach that's been there for 21 years. But I think those are all logistic things that they have to think about. Because if you really do want Morgan Scalley as your next head coach, who is the head coach in waiting, does he get impatient and go look at one of these many jobs that are available? Or does he say, you know what, I'm going to stick it out? And how long is he going to want to wait? And do you jeopardize your future as a program because you decided to wait and let your head coach stay on? But at the same time, he just took you to a 10-2 season. You get what, you don't know what that other side is going to look like and whether you're going to be able to have a competitive environment under Morgan Scalley, despite everybody believing that he can be that guy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we say one more year here on Big 12 today. Josh Furlong, sports director, beat writer covering Utah for KSL. Josh, appreciate your time. Great insight.
Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Have a good day.
You too.
Josh Furlong, sports director, beat writer covering Utah athletics, AP Top 25, and Heisman voter, joining us here on Big 12 today. Coming up next, it's our debate segment. We do it each Thursday. Let's get it on. Will spearhead this.
Get it on.
We do it like that. He's Ari. I'm James. This is Big 12 Radio.
And he flew
Big 12 today here on Big 12 Radio. He's Ari Timken. I'm James Westling. This is our Let's Get It On segment, and fill-in producer Will spearhead this segment. We just asked Will during the commercial break, because he might be joining us tomorrow, if he's getting paid, and he said, I sure hope so, which is the response of all responses.
Let's start some rumors out there. Of course, it's illegal for him to be
I know
working
he's
for
getting
us and
paid,
not.
but I just really liked that response.
Also, can we fill in producer Will? Like, that's Hype Man Will.
Hype Man
You
Will.
had that nickname earlier in the show, and I thought you killed it with that nickname there,
Hype Man Will.
James.
I don't know how people drink this stuff. These carbonated, sparkling mineral waters. Are you a fan? I feel like I just swallowed a balloon.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I'm a fan. I'm a fan. You know, you shouldn't yuck somebody's yum, James.
I'm not.
Because your taste buds and your stomach aren't used to drinking manly drinks like mineral water.
Mineral water, sparkling beverages are manly drinks, I learned today, according to Ari Timken. All right, Will, what are we doing?
Let's argue about mineral drinks.
Yeah,
Let's get it on.
First
Got the
topic.
stats.
It's delicious. It's refreshing.
First topic, mineral water. Just kidding.
Get your name.
But, so for this segment, as I understand it, as fill-in producer, as hype guy, I give you a topic. James has to take one side. Ari has to take another side. You can't waver. You have to make your argument. You have to go 10 toes down, and you have to be concise in your argument so we can get to a bunch of different topics. Is that cool?
Yeah, that's cool. I like it.
Concise.
Okay, so there was wild news around the sports world this week. And for you guys being veterans of sports knowledge, I wanted to bring up a topic outside of the Big 12.
Outside of the Big 12.
You guys have very flaming hot opinions on a lot of things, and I think you guys will on this.
Oh, they're
Ari-
flaming all right.
Ari Tempkins going to go first on this one because I know he has covered this league in his career before.
He is the seasoned vet.
So I want to ask him about
Most connected man in America.
one of them for sure. I want to ask him about a 44-year-old quarterback.
Literally not true.
I want to ask him about a 44-year-old quarterback, Phillip Rivers. I want to ask this question. Is it smart for the Colts to call on a guy that has been out of the league for 5 years, future Hall of Famer potentially, to go up against Jay Harbaugh and the Seahawks this weekend in a sack-heavy defense? Smart or dumb to bring in Phillip Rivers after a half decade on the shelf? Ari.
I think what Phillip Rivers is doing is incredible. I mean, he's 44 years old. To be in physical shape, to get yourself to play in a National Football League game at that age is insane. I mean, truly. Like, I worked out yesterday, and my body is, like, broken down, and I'm 40. So, like, it's hard to get up when you're 40. I mean, this is a league that is played by young, physical guys. I mean, it's a young man's game. And when you get older, your body's broken down. So the fact that he keeps himself in such ridiculously good shape and is able to sign off the street at 44 and play is insane. With that being said,
I was waiting for it.
I'm going to take the side here that's like, how are you in this position again? Like, it's insane to me that the Colts, it's like the same story. And it's funny because they had, you know, the number one pick, can't miss, Peyton Manning won him one Super Bowl, played for a couple of others, right? No, maybe one more?
Broncos.
But with the Colts.
Oh, yes.
He won one with the Colts.
Yes.
But he played
Yeah, he
in
played in two.
played in two with the Colts. And then they draft Andrew Luck number one overall. Basically, since Luck inexplicably retired in the middle of his career, like, they have just been in this horrible holding pattern at the quarterback position. So, but yet they've had consistently good teams all around. So it's, you know, it just boggles my mind they're in this position yet again that you have to sign a quarterback off the street because he's your best option. So this is dumb. This is very dumb. And this goes back to the offseason and previous seasons where they've missed a quarterback in the draft and Anthony Richardson and everything else. Dumb, 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 dumb.
You say dumb, which means I'm here for it. Bring back
Mills, by the
44.
way. Where's
Where
Mills?
is Mills? Will, come on.
You've overcorrected, Will. Last week, Will did too many Mills.
Too many Mills. There
Now
it
we're
is.
getting zero Mills.
No Mills. We need
you.
more Mills.
So legendary Mills Lane. Thank you.
Phillip Rivers, number one, you can get him for pennies on the dollar. Number two, he retired maybe at the pinnacle of his career. He went 11-5 in 2020 at the age of 39 with the Colts.
Yeah.
Got them into the playoffs. threw for almost 4,200 yards, had a quarterback rating of over 100, and he has like 16 kids that he's been tossing the football around in the backyard. So you know that arm is still well-oiled and ready to go. Phillip Rivers, a 1-year deal, come in, help us. What's the Colts record this year? Are they in the playoff discussion? They going to make the playoffs?
Yeah.
They were like really good to
They're
start
eight-
the year.
8-5 right
Yeah.
now.
All the metrics, they had the best offense in the NFL with Daniel Jones, which that's a whole story in itself, why he was so bad with the Giants and all of a sudden so good with the Colts. So Phillip Rivers, yeah, what are they paying him? A couple mil to come in there, play a little football? I'm here for it, Will.
They've lost 3 games in a row. They once were really good. I want to stay in the NFL and talk about quarterback, a much younger quarterback right now. And we're going to talk about a former Big 12 athlete, Shedeur Sanders. Have the Browns found their franchise quarterback, yes or no?
You can go first, young
Wesley's
man.
got to go first.
Oh, the answer is no, unfortunately. I love Shedeur, but Shedeur in the NFL so far from what I have seen looks like a guy that was drafted appropriately in the 5th round. Now, I do feel like the Browns have probably really messed with him. By number one, just all the stuff surrounding him and his teammates not really rallying behind him, and him being the second quarterback that they drafted probably messed with him a little bit. But from what I've seen in terms of what he did in the preseason, what he's done on the field, his house being broken into while he's throwing pick sixes to the Baltimore Ravens a few weeks ago was not good for Shedeur Sanders. No, I don't think the Browns have found their quarterback of the future, but I'm excited to see what he does the rest of the year.
Just real quickly, can you name me the quarterbacks of the Cleveland Browns the last decade? There's only been a few of them, so I'm
the
sure
last decade,
I'm sure it'll be an
do we have
easy
time
list.
for that?
Should be an easy list for you to compile. Yeah, he's a quarter. Are you serious? Yeah, he beats like a flaming pile of dog poop and whatever else they've run on a quarterback for the last decade. Yeah, are you serious? Like, he's giving them a level of hope from a quarterback position that they have not had. I mean, my God, Joe Flacco came in last season or a couple of seasons ago and led them to the playoffs at whatever he was, 40. So, yeah, absolutely. Now, it's funny. They're playing the Bears this week at Soldier Field. If you've seen, the temperatures are expected to be at 20 degrees below zero with the wind chill. It is going to be one of the coldest games ever at Soldier Field, which says a lot because there have been some ridiculously cold games at Soldier Field.
He
So,
played at Colorado. He's going to be fine.
yeah, no, totally. And Caleb Williams played at Oklahoma and USC. I'm sure he'll be fine, too, in those conditions. It should be interesting. But, yeah, dude, again, I mean, he's put up some big-time performances.
I will say he has gotten better each and every start.
Yeah, 23 of 42, 364, and 3 touchdowns and 1 pick against the Tennessee Titans in a 31-29 loss. I mean, it's just a bad team around him. Look, we thought that he was underdrafted. It was egregious where he was drafted. Should he have been a first-round pick? Maybe not, but certainly not a sixth-round pick or whatever he was. And, again, he's clearly, was always better than Dylan Gabriel, despite Dylan Gabriel trying to throw shots at him, because he can see over the offensive line, which is more than I can say about Dylan Gabriel. Yeah, the Browns have found their quarterback. Let's go.
Let's go and
He had a big game against maybe one of the worst defenses in NFL history. Let's get it on! But I digress.
Who, the Titans?
Yeah, they're bad.
In NFL history?
History.
I love it.
He only completed 55% of his passes in that game, too.
So let's talk about the Big 12 and current team playing in the conference, a team you talked about earlier, a team that you said may have a path to the national championship, and that's Texas Tech. It feels like they haven't got a ton of respect nationally. They're starting to get on the map now, but I wonder, this year, does Texas Tech need to win at least 2 games in the college football playoff to earn that national respect, Ari?
Yeah, I think the question was they have to win a game or win the national championship.
Win 2
2, which would mean they get to the national championship.
to get that respect.
The respect, which is not subjective at all. You have to. Yeah, there's a very black and white path to earn respect.
I mean, look, I think if they win 1 game, that would substantiate it. But what I think doesn't mean a hill of beans to what, nationally people are thinking in terms of this sport. So, yeah, absolutely they need to win 2 games in order to substantiate this and really help to get the Big 12 to that upper echelon. I mean, look, if they beat Indiana, a Big 10 champ, after beating Oregon, that would have showed you just how good they are because Indiana's whole claim to fame this year before beating Ohio State was beating Oregon. So think about this. What if Texas Tech is able to beat Oregon, Indiana, and then Ohio State win a national championship?
Be a pretty nice path.
Let's get it on.
I mean,
Big Ten killers.
the Big Ten has won 3 straight national championships.
Yeah.
Is it 2 or 3?
So you had
Who
Ohio
won it
State,
2 years ago?
Michigan.
That's right. So 2. 2 straight.
Yeah,
national
Georgia won
titles.
the year before that.
So that's been kind of they won 2 straight, Georgia.
Let's get it on.
So they've been obviously a powerhouse conference, and the Big 12 would be beating the best of the Big 12 would be beating the 3 best teams in the Big 10. And remember, only one Big 12 team makes it. They have, how many does the Big 10 have? 3?
Yes. Yes, 3.
Yeah.
Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon.
So yeah, Texas Tech has to win 2. Absolutely, they do.
Okay. I will say, on the flip side, they only need to win 1 game. If they win 1 game in the college football playoff, I think they've earned that national respect because that win will likely be over Oregon. And even though they're a higher seed, Oregon has the pedigree, Oregon has the budget, Oregon has a more expensive roster than Texas Tech, by the way. I just think that 1 win over a Big Ten team, that second game would be a loss to either Indiana or Oklahoma or Alabama. I think they will earn enough national respect to say, hey, this transfer portal thing, Joey McGuire has them cooking down in Lubbock.
Yeah, but if they just beat Oregon
Let's get it on.
and then lose to Indiana, you've got everybody saying, well, look, they would have finished 3rd in the Big 10.
Let's get it on.
Yeah, I actually think it might take 2. But,
Let's get it on.
like, how do we define national respect? That's a whole different topic.
It's black and white.
Yeah, yes. If they beat Oregon, I'll feel good about what they've done. That's the baby step process for the Big 12. Is let's win a game in the college football playoff, show that we are capable of that. That's what we talked about way back in the summer leading into this season. Never saw the Big 12 having a bye without the automatic buys being in play. So I think, yeah, you win a game, you're one of the last 4 teams left. I think you'd have to earn national respect.
Let's keep talking about the Big Ten. We're going to go to Michigan, a story that has probably taken up a ton of segments across the country today, and we'll use a little bit more time here. So Sharon Moore getting fired yesterday. That's probably the best opening in America right now. No debate there, but the question is this a job that someone should take, or is it a complete mess that you think people should avoid and nobody should touch? A crazy situation that has had a ton of scandals against their program over the last handful of years.
All right, I get the lead on this one. I'll say it's absolutely the best open job currently in America. They're only 2 years removed from a national title. They're still a perennial top 10 recruiting program. They're in the Big Ten money machine. They've got the resources, the facilities, the fan base, the NIL backing. And Sharon Moore, what he did behind the scenes isn't a mess for the next guy. I think that whoever takes that job is walking into a really strong situation, especially with a 5-star blue chip quarterback who's going to be in his 2nd year. Michigan has the dollars to pay him and bring him back next year. That's how they got him in the first place in Bryce Underwood. So, yeah, it's been one of the craziest carousels ever. But I would say absolutely right now, Michigan is still an elite job in America.
Yeah, but the issue with that, and I'm so happy you took that side of this argument. I actually want to shake your hand and thank you for doing that so that I can make the counter argument in this case because, I mean, it's not just the Sharon Moore thing, and who knows, as some of these specifics start coming out, what this actually looks like, but they also cheated. I don't know if you know that. They were caught cheating and then penalized for it. You look back historically at Michigan, obviously this is the winningest program in college football. They love to tell you about that. Also, it takes you about 5 seconds to figure out when somebody graduated from Michigan that they graduated from Michigan. Nobody loves themselves more than somebody that graduated from Michigan and has a Michigan degree.
Let's get it on.
Like Rich Rod, Brady Hoke, Sharon Moore now, they have not been very successful post Lloyd Carr, and even with Jim Harbaugh, he goes 10-3, 10-3, 8-5, 10-3, 9-4, 2-4 the COVID year. Then he starts cheating, goes 12-2, 13-1, and wins the national title. 15-0 in the last year, winning the national title, going undefeated with 5 different coaches because they cheated. So, yeah, you're not just talking about the scandal with Sherrod Moore and how toxic that's going to be around the athletic department. It's also the cheating scandal. The fact that, like, people just brushed over the fact that they were stealing signs and, I mean, just egregiously cheating, and so much so that an investigation led to suspensions, fines, and penalties. But nothing to see here. Just the winningest program in college football getting caught cheating, and nobody wants to talk about it.
And Harbaugh still has NCAA all over him when he left to the NFL, going at the perfect time.
Why did he leave and go to the NFL?
Yeah.
Why? Because he was going to basically deal with a suspension had he stayed in college football. Michigan has not won anything unless they cheat.
Sherrod Moore had a bunch of deleted text messages, which is why he got suspended at the start of this year. Maybe it was last year, whenever it was. Between him and Harbaugh and this whole thing. Their reputation is a mess.
Wild to me that people don't realize that, like, deleted text messages aren't actually a thing.
Very easy to recover. Very easy. Watch a lot of Dateline. You can get those texts.
Just a word to the wise here. Don't put any stuff you don't want on the record. In a digital world where everything is there. Just a thought.
I live my life on the record.
You should.
That's, on the airwaves. So, final one.
Michigan is the most overrated program in college football since the 2000s. Last 25 years, most overrated program in college football.
Well, don't we have Greg Wrubell?
We do. We have one of the top guests in the country coming up next. Radio play-by-play voice of
Hype Man Will.
you.
Hype Man
Yes,
Will.
That's hype.
Do we have time for one more? Should we get to Greg?
I wanted to get to this one, but we could do it maybe later. It was going to be Capital One Orange Bowl. Yes or no, we're going to see James Westling there in person for a live pregame show, and Ari goes first.
Let's get to Greg. We'll talk about that later.
That's a good one. All right, Greg Wrubell, play-by-play announcer for BYU, voice of the Cougars, coming up next on Big 12 Today. On Big 12 Radio, heard exclusively on TuneIn, watching us on Big 12 Studios. It's Big 12 today here on Big 12 Radio. We are powered by Modelo. This is the Big 12 Conference. This is a different league. You're watching us on Big 12 Studios. Alongside Ari Timken, I'm James Westling. We welcome in Greg Wrubell, the voice of the BYU Cougars, all BYU, all the time. And Greg, we had you on right before the Big 12 championship game, so now we visit right after. Let's talk about the game and BYU and their snub when it comes to the college football playoff. We think that maybe that Big 12 championship game told us more about Texas Tech than it did BYU, but, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, if you just want to take a look at just, straight resume and straight data and ignore what you saw in those two Texas Tech games, I think BYU had as good a case as any to be in the CFP, and I was on the show last week with you guys banging the drum for, 11-1 BYU, knowing they had a bad day in Lubbock. And then they had another bad day in Arlington, and it's unfortunate. But BYU gave the committee just enough ammunition to shoot down BYU's shot or BYU's case for the CFP. Yes, Texas Tech's an elite football team. That's a pretty high bar to remain competitive with that team for 60 minutes. But 29-7 was followed by 34-7, and the committee referenced multiple times. We just didn't think BYU competed very well in those two games. And, it's a 13-game season, but in terms of the committee's eyeballs, they were locked in on Lubbock in that 10 a.m. Mountain Time, noon Eastern game in early December, and they were locked in, or early November, and they were locked in on Arlington with that same time slot in early December. And both games kind of looked the same to them, unfortunately. And, there were some nuances in the games, but both games kind of looked the same to them. And they basically said, yeah, that's probably not the team we want in our playoff. We just didn't see them be competitive enough with a really good football team. And, yeah, the standard's pretty high, right? Texas Tech. That said, I wish BYU would have given the committee more to think about. I think a 34-31 game, a 27-24 game, something like that, I think BYU would have had a really, really good shot to edge out Miami. But I think the way that game went, unfortunately, again, gave the committee just enough to go, we feel better about this team over that team.
Yeah, well said. Hard to disagree. What surprised you in that game, Greg, if anything?
No takeaways again. BYU played 13 games this year. They had takeaways in 11 of them. The defense, that is. And the only two they didn't get a takeaway were the Texas Tech games. So that surprised me. I thought BYU's defense would find a way. And you know what? The plays were there to be made again. They probably had two picks they should have had, similar to the game in Lubbock. The defense was really good and good enough in Lubbock. And the defense was, again, good enough. Texas Tech didn't put up eye-popping numbers against BYU, but they didn't need to because they didn't turn the ball over. And they got so many takeaways. BYU was -7 in the turnover margin in the two games against Texas Tech. They were -3 followed by a -4. Well, you don't win any games at -3. All right. Under Kalani, BYU's now 0-11 when -3 or worse. You just don't win with that number. Wow. And the other number that was surprising was the average starting field position number, which was obviously influenced by those takeaways in BYU territory. But that was the worst average starting field position margin game in Kalani's history. 10 seasons. They were -25 yards in average starting field position. That was the worst game. The third worst game was the game a month before in Lubbock at -18. You just don't overcome -3, -4, -18, -25 in those two stats. Those two stats tell almost, you could weed out a lot of stuff. And you can kind of zero in on those two numbers, and those are really usually pretty telling numbers on who had a shot to win the game or not.
Greg Wrubell, you have seen a lot of football as voice of the Cougars at BYU over the years. So this Texas Tech team, is this a team that can win a national championship?
I think so. We talked about this last week. Where are the holes? Where are the obvious glaring weaknesses for this team? Where are they? I don't see them. The only thing that's gotten away from them is maybe a few too many giveaways, but they were clean against BYU in two games. I just don't see where they're soft at all. I give them a great shot, absolutely.
It's expectations change, Greg, but I also think like there's important context here of like how successful of a season this was for BYU the last 2 years. Again, obviously with the way this thing built, the expectations changed, and not getting to the playoff is disappointing, and you certainly feel like, again, maybe the committee had more to think about. Kalani said after the game, like, I at least hope they show our graphic. They didn't. Just give us a big picture thought here from the voice of the BYU Cougs.
Yeah, 11-2 last year, and as we speak today, 11-2 this year. I mean, that's an exceptional record, and to not be in the playoff either years, with a pair of 11-2s is kind of a tough pill to swallow, which makes me, think that it might take a larger field to get BYU in the field at some point, because you can't if you play 2 years of power conference football and you go 11-2, and you don't sniff the playoff. Might need to be a bigger field to make sure there's enough room for you. And yet I also maintain it's kind of funny, had BYU faced a team other than Texas Tech in the regular season slate, had they missed a different team, because you play 9, you miss 6 every year in the Big 12. If they'd had someone else slipped into that Texas Tech slot in the regular season, BYU's probably in the playoff this year. So it was kind of some bad schedule luck, too, having to get Texas Tech twice on this year of all years. But I really do look forward to a bigger field. I don't know. I think it wasn't just the BYU. Like, I'm pretty BYU-focused, obviously, and the BYU snub generated some heat, but not a ton. I think they were, again, because they were left off all these graphics, they weren't a discussion point, and that was intentional. They were intentionally shunted to the side while they should have been snuck right into the midst of the discussion. That said, they weren't the only discussion point. The Notre Dame and the Miami situations generate a ton more heat, but because there was heat, I think we are going to take a look. This is going to be a situation that probably evolves to where a 12-team field with a committee choosing them, there's going to have to be some modifications moving forward, either how the committee does its job or the number of teams they pick. But I think it can't stay at 12 like this for too much longer. And this might have been the straw that broke the camel's back this year, the tipping point, the way things turned out this year. It might benefit BYU in the long run, but BYU won't be the pure impetus for it. That said, there probably are going to be some changes that make this thing look a little different moving forward, and I think could benefit BYU. I mean, the idea of the AQs of a 24-team field with 16 P4 AQs with 4 for the big. You wouldn't take that today?
Right.
4 for the Big 12? I mean, even 2 for the Big 12 is a bit of an appeal when you consider the fact they got in 1 last year and 1 this year. But AQs for the P4s, bring it on. I mean, that's the European soccer model, right? I mean, or the national soccer, or the international soccer model is the countries that play the best soccer, they get the most bids. That's just the way it is. And there's data. It's all based on coefficients and years of stats. And so you take the best leagues, you play the best football, you give them their AQs, and then you go earn it on the field. Just because you get an AQ doesn't mean, all's free and easy. You still have to go earn those spots by your play on the field. But I love the AQ idea. And if you're giving the P4s the benefit of the doubt, all the better.
Greg Wrubell, the voice of BYU, joining us here on Big 12 today. Greg, did you get the sense after the Big 12 championship game that Kalani Sitake and the BYU players kind of knew that their fate had been sealed, that they were probably going to be out of the playoff? And then tell us about the bowl matchup and the excitement level there.
Yeah, I think it was, they were being, I think naturally party line optimistic, but I don't think there was a real serious thought that they were going to, jump anybody. Based on what happened on Saturday. So, they said the right things, but I don't think they were surprised or heartbroken when Sunday came around. It's just unfortunate, right? I mean, the rankings were what they were going in. The committee saw what they saw on Saturday, and there wasn't enough heat there to melt anything in front of BYU. So that's just the way it turned out. And we kind of sensed it during the game. They hung in. I mean, the 7-0 lead after one quarter was good. In fact, this is the first time in 22 games that BYU lost it scored first in. They had a 21-game win streak going in when scoring first. They scored first and then didn't score again. All that said, yeah, the way the game kind of, dissipated on BYU, I think their hopes kind of dissipated at the same time. Georgia Tech, it's a nice matchup. It's a pair of ranked teams, which is I think what you want at this time of year if you can manage it. The Pop-Tarts is kind of a fun bowl, if you will. They do a lot of things on social that kind of give it a little more profile. That makes it more interesting. So there's some nice things about it. We'll get into the finer points of X's and O's. Coach Key's done a real nice job in taking an option-based program flipping it a bit, but keeping a quarterback run component that generates a lot of production. So it'll be a fun matchup that way. But if you're not in the playoff, it's just another game to hopefully get you into the offseason, in the right way. Would have been really nice, as we all know. Would have been really nice if Notre Dame had agreed to play BYU in Orlando. I thought that was going to be the case. That would have made it kind of a marquee matchup, right? So Georgia Tech is the next best option, and you just go play it and hope to get your 12th win. It'll be BYU's first 12-win season since 2001,
Wow.
And their fifth 12-win season overall. So they're shooting for that.
Yeah, incredible. And yeah, it's super disappointing with Notre Dame. But let's talk basketball. That's certainly a team that could win a national championship. And what a game the other night at Madison Square Garden where Rob Wright hits a ridiculous shot to win the game against Clemson. A.J. Dybantsa scores 22 of his 28 in the second half. Yeah, it's a very good basketball team.
I was breaking it down this morning. A.J. Dybantsa and Cam Boozer are the only two players nationally right now. The fact they're both freshmen is incredible, but the only two players nationally at 20 points a game, 6 rebounds a game, 3 assists per game, plus 50% field, 35% arc, 75% free throw.
Wow.
Those are really solid numbers across the board. Just those two guys right now, and they're both rookies, which is crazy. What a team. This is a really interesting BYU team. And maybe we talked about this before, guys. I forget. But, last year's group was kind of that really deep team. You could kind of go hockey line change and not lose a lot last year. The second group was almost as good as the first group. This year, it's the first group. BYU ranks 355th in bench production right now. 355th. They are the only power conference program in the bottom 10 nationally in bench production. But they're not the only good team in the bottom 10, 20-ish in bench production. Houston almost gets nothing. There are other 9-1 teams getting very little from their bench, but BYU is one of those teams that doesn't get it from the reserves right now. This is a crazy number, guys. So they're on a 5-game win streak. Win 1 in the 5-game win streak was against Wisconsin in Salt Lake City a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. The bench scored 29 points, really balanced game. BYU scored 90. It was a great win over Wisconsin. So 29 bench points in that game. Over the next 4 games, BYU's won them all. The bench has 20 points total over those 4 games.
Wow.
BYU scored 313 points in those 4 wins, 293 from the starters, 20 from the bench. But it works. But somehow it works. Now, you're going to need the starting 5 to stay healthy. But they're going to be guys, they're going to be playing 30 to 35 minutes a game, every game. That's how this thing's going to go. And Kevin knows it. Coach Young knows it. Last year's team was built differently. This year's team is built for those starting 5 to be on the floor a lot, and it's a great starting group. It really is. Rob Wright, Richie Saunders, A.J. Dybantsa, Moo Davis, and Keba Keita. Those guys can win you a lot of games, and they've already won BYU 8 of 9 games to this point. Really fascinating team. They're kind of a low assist rate team. A lot of one-on-one, a lot of ISO. They can do it that way, but they're good 2-point shooters. They're good 3-point shooters. They're good free throw shooters. They take care of the basketball, and they have exceptional talent with their big 3. Dybantsa, Saunders, and Wright, they all average right now between 17 and 20 points per game.
Yeah, I look at that bench production and think, because Houston's kind of the same way, is that those 5 guys that are starting are so good, you can't take them off the floor. I think BYU still has a capable bench. It's just hard to take minutes away from that group that's starting.
Right, and it's fair to say, too, the Cougs are dealing with 2 season-ending injuries in their guard line that makes the bench thinner. They already lost Nate Pickens. Now they lose Dawson Baker. That's 2,000 career points you're missing that were supposed to be your bench scorers. You don't have them anymore. So they were set up to have a good bench. It just hasn't turned out that way yet. That's why I think these next 4 games are really big. These are 4 home. By the way, they've played 2 Marriott Center games so far this season. Here we are in mid-December. They've played 7 away from home, 2 at home. They get a 4-game homestand coming up right now. But those 4 games are 1 quad 3 and 3 quad 4s. All right, so you hope to have a run of success here at home, and this is where you need those bench guys to get their minutes. Hopefully games you can win, and games where they can come in and get some confidence playing together and with the big group, because they haven't had that luxury to this point with the schedule they've faced. It's been a high-quality schedule. 6 quad 1, quad 2 wins already for BYU, tied for the nation's lead.
They're just getting the Marriott Center ready for Big 12 play. Just making the fans wait a little bit longer before they get juiced up to be at home in their home environment. Greg Wrubell, play-by-play for BYU. Appreciate your time. Great to see you as always, and we'll talk soon.
James Ari, always a pleasure. We'll do it again. Thanks, guys.
Greg Wrubell, the voice of the BYU Cougars.
You know, it's funny, James. John Calipari leaving Kentucky for Arkansas is maybe the greatest thing to ever happen to BYU basketball.
Domino effect.
Yeah, and you know, Mark Pope was a pretty good coach at BYU, and I mean, he's not having a ton of success right now in Kentucky. Like they're not happy with him, and I mean, AJ DeBonsa is not in Provo right now if Mark Pope is still their coach. What Kevin Young has been able to do, he's such a great thinker. I mean, what a tremendous move that was for BYU to be able to hire this guy.
Very well said. All right, we will have the final whistle coming up next as we wrap up the show. He's Ari, I'm James. We're powered by Modelo, exclusively on TuneIn and Big 12 Studios. One final time here on Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio. It's the final whistle. We are powered by Modelo. He is Ari Timken. I'm James Westling. Hype Man Will is filling in for Taman today on the controls. We love breaking news as the final whistle. So much breaking news. How about this one? Baylor is finalizing a deal to hire Joe Klanderman as their new defensive coordinator. Spent the last 7 years at Kansas State, including the last 6 as the DC. He was the defensive coordinator that coordinated K-State's Big 12 title team in 2022. Runs that 3-3-5, kind of 4-2-5 hybrid. K-State's been really nails defensively. I think this is a good hire for Baylor. He produced over 40 players that earned all Big 12 honors.
Yeah, and a guy that was at North Dakota State with Chris Kleiman, and then came over with Kleiman to K-State, and I believe he took over as the defensive coordinator in year 2 with Kleiman, so he was kind of a defensive assistant, and has been obviously very successful. And my assumption is that Colin Klein wants to go in a different direction and get some new blood in there, and that's the reason that this opportunity opened up. And what's interesting too is I'm not sure who's going to be calling the defensive plays. We obviously saw for the last couple of years that Dave Aranda was calling the defensive plays. I mean, if I'm Dave Aranda, I'm probably going to hand the play calling on the defensive side over to Joe Klanderman. He's an experienced play caller on the defensive side. He's been successful. It's a great hire for Baylor.
Yeah, Smokey was telling us, David Smoke from 365 Sports was telling us earlier this week that it was Mack Rhodes, the Baylor AD, that said, hey, you need to step in and call these plays defensively, and that Aranda – it's like, okay, I'll do it, but it wasn't really up to him. I would think Klanderman would have complete control of that Baylor defense if they're going to be improved on that side of the ball.
Yeah. And, you get it, right? Part of the thing that made Dave Aranda attractive as a head coach was his acumen as a defensive coordinator. And, so to me, it's the reason why if I'm hiring a coach, I'm not hiring them for their schemes. I'm hiring them for their leadership qualities, the delegation abilities, so many things that go into it. Schemes come and go. And I'm not saying that Aranda was hired for his schemes. I'm simply saying, you just can't, you cannot hire a coordinator that is only getting the job because of their ability to coordinate. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yes, it does. It does. Coordinators coordinate offenses and defenses. I got it. I can't stop reading about this Sharon Moore stuff. I'm here for the hot goss. Spill that tea. I cannot get enough.
Let's get it on!
I'm embarrassed to admit how much I am all in on this story. It just gets juicier and juicier, but can't speculate. We don't want to speculate, but it's wild. Clearly Michigan kind of knew what was going on. You were telling me during the break, and then they bring both in, him and his...
Yeah, there's John U. Bacon... seems to have the most credible reporting on this.
John U. Bacon?
Yeah. John U. Bacon. Author of The Gales of November, The Untold Story of Edmund Fitzgerald, available October 7th. You can pre-order here, Ann Arbor, Michigan. He's a longtime reporter, appears, and is very well connected being out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. And so in the middle of tweeting about his new book that just released last month, he also has some information, which I'll read now, and says... From reliable sources, the UM employee presented irrefutable documentation about Moore's conduct to UM leaders this morning. That was yesterday. The president and regents had seen enough. Emmanuel fired him this afternoon. Moore is now detained in protective custody at a mental health institution. Potential update correction. Moore is being protected by mental health professionals around the clock, but I've heard different reports as to where. Might be a distinction without a difference, but wanted to clarify as more information came in. He also previously had tweeted that the university brought both the employee and Sharon Moore in for a visit this summer to sort of ask if this was going on, and both reportedly, according to John Bacon, said no. They both basically said, no, this is not going on. And
he's in a psych ward?
Yeah, he's got, I don't want to speak out of turn here, being protected by mental health professionals around the clock. This, according to John U. Bacon, reporter out of the Ann Arbor area.
Well, he's not going to get his $14 to $16 million buyout or whatever you would want to call it, because this is very much with cause. So Michigan will have a new coach, and Man, this is
And look, I mean, the reason, you've got to really be a detective and trying to search for information that's credible that you can then go onto the, errors say.
exactly right.
And of all of the stuff that's being thrown against the wall here, it seems like this guy, he's got the most to lose in terms of reporting if he's false reporting something, he's got a lot to lose. This is a guy that's, written multiple books and, out of Ann Arbor, clearly you're a, longtime reporter, reputable guy. Seems like the most credible, and there's nothing specific to the, alleged incident here, which, again, leads you to believe the investigation's ongoing. There's a lot that's not being reported yet.
John U. Bacon.
Yep.
It's a name, bro.
John Bacon. Middle name U.
John Bacon. Middle name U. His brother's Chris P. I like it. All right. Where do we go from here? My Texas driver's license update.
I have an update.
I have an update. I had to go to the.
So just quickly summarize your whole situation here for the folks that are not privy to it. You moved to Texas, only 2 years ago?
Years ago, and still don't have a valid Texas driver's license.
Or
and
Texas
I waited till
plates?
or Texas license plates. So I've waited till the last possible second, of course, because who doesn't, before my ID expires in February of 2026. Well, I got pulled over recently and found out that I've been driving on a suspended driver's license for about the past year from an unpaid court appearance that was to prove that I paid a speeding ticket from 3 years ago, which I did pay eventually over time. And so I just had some outstanding fees that I had to pay to get this whole thing to go away. Basically just court fees. Court appearance fees. I pay them, they're $120 or whatever, and I get my license back. So I can get my license from the previous state to get my new Texas license, and I don't have to actually take a physical driving test. So to do this, I call them up and I'm like, hey, I'm ready to pay these fees, and they say, we don't do that over the phone. You'll have to send us a money order.
Of course. Why would they make it easy for you?
Why would they make it easy? So I'm standing in line yesterday at the Western Union getting my money order. Felt like I was playing Oregon Trail. It's 1884 up in here. A money order? Had to get a stamp? Write send it to a P.O. box? I felt dumb. I didn't know what to do. Everybody in line's money order savants, okay? They live and breathe with money orders. They're cashing checks. I get up there, I'm like, how do I fill this out? Where do I put the address? What do I write here? What do I write here? Where do I sign? A money order, Ari. I will get my license.
Look, there's a lot of criminals that, pay court fees through bad checks or bad credit cards, right? So they had to figure out a different method.
Well, I've been lumped into that category because my window tinting was too dark on my vehicle.
Okay, so the next step.
I've been observing a lot of other vehicles and their window tint on the roads, and I'm very much par for the course.
Are you turning people in now? You call it I don't know if you saw the license plate. Real quickly, just
RWF 174. It looks pretty dark.
Why did you just give out my license plate? That was weird. How you committed my license plate to memory? That's bizarre. So the update here is you now have to pay your court fees in Kansas with a money order,
which I did. Yep.
Which you did. You waited in line.
Yeah,
at
it's a step-by-step process. I went to Western Union. Okay. Got the money order. So the next step is getting a gas cap for my vehicle.
See, this is
so
great.
It will pass state inspection.
This is a long process of James learning the world here.
And then after that, I will go and I will register my vehicle and get my official Texas tags, which you have to do that first before you get a license.
It's like Big City James over here.
So there could be a lot of people out there on the road like Will driving around that don't actually have a license, but they just have Texas plates.
I love this. It's Big City James here.
City,
just learning all these lessons about Western Union
real
and money
life
orders
stuff.
and licenses and license plates and paying taxes and paying bills.
It's a whole thing. All right?
Right up before our eyes. Look at this.
How much Black Friday shopping did you do?
I think you've already asked me that.
Not on the air.
Pretty sure.
No, you've got a new fit every day.
This is not new.
We've got 15 packages on our doorstep each and every day. Every time I open the door, I feel like I'm unwrapping somebody else's Christmas. I don't know what's in them.
Here's what we got.
I've had Christmas every day. I don't know what's in these packages, so I'm opening
All
these
right, so
packages.
this is clearly a point of contention with you. You've now brought this up 2 times. So maybe we should do sort of a rehearsal on what you could maybe say to your wife about this. So maybe we should kind of go through the motions here of
I mean, you're the guy that I want to take relationship advice from.
No,
so
and it's not.
Tell me about
it's
it.
not relationship advice. We're just role playing here. Just clearly this is a point of contention for you. You've kind of brought this up without any mention of it whatsoever twice in the show today.
I was told we were done with our Christmas shopping weeks ago. We're hitting double-digit packages every day. Like, the delivery drivers are annoyed. I can sense it. They're like, I've been in this house 4 times today. Like,
So they're like, I can barely feed my family, and you're ordering 15 packages a day.
Like, I feel bad. I wait till they leave before I go outside. It's a whole thing.
So what do you do with the boxes? You bring them in, you just leave them there?
Yeah.
James. Oh, what's this? And you start opening it up. Really? Come on.
So the counter is to just ruin Christmas.
I mean, they could be gifts for James.
That's it, Ari. How many of these are gifts for
Then
me?
you couldn't be mad, right? If they're gifts for you.
Exactly. That's what deep down I'm hoping is the case. So that's why I'm not opening the packages. All right? The Amazon people who bought this section is just pictures of my wife everywhere.
So let's see how it plays out on Christmas Day, and let's do some math.
She likes wrapping gifts. It's very therapeutic. That's why she keeps
I
buying.
couldn't care less. It's not my.
Okay.
But you clearly care about this. You brought this up twice in the show today without any mention
Bro, I'm
of
trying
anything.
to take a vacation next summer. What are you talking about? Come on. All right. He's Ari Timken. I'm James Westling. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll wrap up the work week with Big 12 Today here on Big 12 Radio. We've been powered by Modelo. We think Will might be. Something tells me Hype Man Will is going to be back tomorrow. But TBD, time will tell. This has been Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio. Heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios. We're out. Talk to you tomorrow.